What if I told you that one forgotten document, hidden in a dusty archive in Philadelphia, could rewrite everything you thought you knew about the American Revolution? That behind the celebrated heroes there were shadow figures, master spies, secret alliances, and a conspiracy so vast it could shake the very foundations of the nation. Today we journey back to the year 1777, where the fate of a fledgling America hung on whispers, coded letters, and choices that would alter history forever. Chapter 1: Shadows over Philadelphia. Philadelphia, 1777. The city was alive with a tense energy that no parade or celebration could mask. Redcoats marched along cobblestone streets while the Continental Congress convened in secrecy, plotting strategies that would either save or doom the colonies. Johnathan Mercer, a young scribe with sharp eyes and a restless mind, moved silently between the candle-lit halls of Independence Hall. He wasn't a soldier nor a politician. He was a messenger of secrets. Every letter he carried could mean life or death, victory or defeat. Mercer had stumbled upon something extraordinary, a series of letters suggesting that not all British officers were loyal to their crown. Some were covertly aiding the rebels. As he deciphered a particularly cryptic letter, his hands trembled. Each word painted a picture of betrayal and courage, of plots within plots, and alliances that spanned oceans. He realized that history, the kind taught in schools and celebrated in monuments, was only the surface. Beneath it lay stories of unsung heroes whose courage had quietly steered the course of freedom. Mercer's discovery would soon draw him into a perilous game of intelligence and deception. With each step, he walked a fine line between patriotism and survival. And unbeknownst to him, powerful eyes were watching. Eyes that would stop at nothing to protect secrets capable of shaking the new world to its core. Chapter 2: The Web of Secrets. The night was unusually still in Philadelphia, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Mercer's candle flickered against the walls of his cramped room, casting shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. He sat hunched over the table, the cryptic letters spread before him, ink smudged by nervous fingers. The message, written in a code only a few men could understand, hinted at a clandestine meeting between a British officer sympathetic to the American cause and a mysterious foreign envoy. Mercer's pulse quickened. If he could uncover the details, the Continental Army would gain a strategic advantage that might change the outcome of the war. But he wasn't alone. Across the city, in a dimly lit tavern near the Delaware River, whispers of spies and traitors floated over mugs of ale. Mercer's informant, a woman known only as Clara Whitlock, had arranged for him to meet a man who claimed to have first-hand knowledge of the meeting. Clara's reputation for secrecy was unmatched, and her network of contacts stretched from Boston to London. Mercer arrived at the tavern, careful to avoid the watchful eyes of British patrols. The man he was to meet sat in a shadowed corner, face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. "You have something I need," Mercer said cautiously. "And I have something you don't realize yet. The British officer is not acting alone. There's a chain, a network of spies so extensive it reaches the very heart of Philadelphia's Congress. Every letter, every meeting, every decision is being monitored." Mercer swallowed hard. This was bigger than he had imagined. The war, the politics, even the ideals of freedom, they were all caught in a web far more intricate and dangerous than any soldier on the battlefield could see. "We have only one chance," the man continued, leaning closer. "We must intercept the communication at Chestnut Hill tomorrow night. If we fail, the information will vanish, and thousands of lives and the fate of the revolution will be lost." Mercer knew the risk. To enter British territory, even at night, was nearly a death sentence. Yet the fire of responsibility, the weight of history pressing on his shoulders, pushed him forward. As he left the tavern, the city streets were empty, but the feeling of being watched followed him like a shadow. Every step he took resonated with the tension of a war that was not just fought with muskets and cannons, but with secrecy, intelligence, and courage hidden in the dark. Tomorrow, the first move in a game that could rewrite history would be made, and Mercer, a mere scribe, was now at its center. Chapter 3. The Midnight Rendezvous. The moon hung low over Philadelphia, its pale light reflecting off the icy cobblestones. Johnathan Mercer moved with deliberate caution, the leather satchel containing the coded letters pressed tightly against his side. Each shadow seemed alive, and every rustle of wind carried the possibility of discovery. Chestnut Hill loomed ahead, a ridge overlooking the city, quiet but with a clear view of the British encampments below. Mercer had memorized the path, avoiding the main streets where patrols prowled. His heart pounded in sync with the rhythm of his careful steps. One misstep could cost him his life, and with it, the secrets he carried. He reached the designated spot, a small grove at the edge of the hill, where the silhouettes of trees blended into the night. There, waiting in the darkness, was Clara Whitlock. Her face was pale, but her eyes held the unyielding determination that had become her signature. "You're late," she whispered, though the slight tremor in her voice betrayed concern. "I had to avoid patrols," Mercer replied, kneeling beside a hollow in the ground where the letters would be exchanged. "Do you have the package?" Clara nodded, producing a small rolled bundle of parchment tied with red ribbon. "This is it. Inside are the decoded messages from Major Hastings. If we can get these to General Washington before dawn, it could save thousands of lives." Before Mercer could respond, a sound shattered the stillness. The distant clatter of boots on stone. British soldiers were patrolling nearby, too close for comfort. Mercer and Clara froze. The wind carried the faintest whistle, a signal they had agreed upon if danger approached. Without a word, they melted further into the shadows, holding their breath as the patrol passed mere yards away. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move, and it would be over. When the soldiers disappeared from view, Mercer allowed himself a brief moment to exhale. "We need to move," he said. "The courier waits near the river. If we miss this, the opportunity is gone." They navigated the darkened paths, every step a calculated risk. By the time they reached the Delaware River, the city behind them was silent again, as though it held its breath for the patriots daring to challenge the empire under the cover of night. At the riverbank, a small skiff awaited, its lone rower concealed beneath a wide cloak. The exchange was swift. Mercer handed over the letters, and the courier vanished into the fog, gliding silently across the river. The mission was a success, but Mercer knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere in Philadelphia, eyes had watched. Somewhere in the British command, plans had shifted in response. The game of espionage had only grown deadlier, and Mercer and Clara were now pieces in a match that could determine the fate of a nation. As they disappeared back into the night, Mercer understood one truth. In war, the real battles were often fought in silence, and the cost of failure could echo through history forever. Chapter 4. Betrayal in the Halls. By dawn, Philadelphia was waking up under a pale winter sun. Smoke from chimneys spiraled into the sky, and merchants called out in the streets, oblivious to the shadow war unfolding in their midst. Johnathan Mercer returned to his small room, exhausted, yet restless, knowing that the night's success was only a temporary victory. Clara Whitlock arrived soon after, her breath visible in the frosty morning air. "We did it," she said softly. "The letters are in Washington's hands, but—" She hesitated, eyes scanning the street outside. "I think someone saw us. I've been following rumors, whispers that someone inside Congress is leaking information to the British." Mercer's stomach tightened. Betrayal within their own ranks was worse than any redcoat ambush. The revolutionary cause depended not just on courage, but trust, and trust was fragile. He unrolled a fresh piece of parchment and began transcribing his notes from the previous night. Patterns emerged, names, dates, locations. Every piece of information was a clue. One name recurred, Johnathan Mercer, a delegate whose speeches favored reconciliation with Britain. Nothing concrete, but enough to make Mercer uneasy. That evening, he decided to visit Congress under the guise of delivering routine documents. The hallways were filled with the shuffle of papers, whispered conversations, and the tension of men who knew that every word could tip the balance of war. Mercer observed Caro from a distance. The delegate's manner was calm, but there was a subtle nervousness in his movements, a flick of the eye, a tightened grip on his quill. Mercer's instinct screamed that Caro was involved, but how deep he could not yet determine. As he left the hall, a shadow detached itself from a pillar. A figure approached, a young clerk with a folded note, hands trembling. Mercer recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Clara's. "Meet me at the Old North Church tonight. There's something you must see. Trust no one." That night, Mercer crept through the snowy streets to the church, the bell tower looming above like a sentinel. Clara was waiting, her face grim. "Look," she whispered, handing him a small bundle of letters intercepted from Caro's office. The content was damning. Secret communications with British officers, suggesting a plot to sabotage the Continental Army's supply lines. Mercer felt a chill. Betrayal was not abstract anymore. It was tangible, hidden in ink and paper. Every letter was a weapon, every word a spark that could ignite disaster. "We must act carefully," Clara said. "Exposing him too soon could tip off the British. But if we do nothing—" She left the sentence hanging, letting the weight of history settle on them. Mercer knew she was right. One wrong move, and everything they had risked, the letters, the spies, the revolution itself, could collapse like a house of cards. In the silent shadows of the Old North Church, Johnathan Mercer understood that the war was no longer only about muskets and cannons. It was about secrets, loyalty, and the courage to face enemies who wore the faces of friends. And the enemy was closer than anyone dared imagine. Chapter 5. The Spy in Their Midst. The air in Philadelphia had grown colder, but the tension inside Johnathan Mercer's small room was hotter than any summer sun. Clara Whitlock spread the intercepted letters across the table, their edges curling from countless readings. Each line was a revelation, proof that Johnathan Mercer, a trusted delegate, was working with the British to sabotage the Continental Army. Mercer ran a hand through his hair. "If we confront him directly, he'll vanish and the letters will disappear. We need a plan." Clara nodded, her eyes steely. "We need evidence so undeniable that even the most skeptical members of Congress will act. And we need allies, careful allies, people who understand the cost of secrecy but are willing to take the risk." They began compiling a list: trusted patriots, low-profile members of the intelligence network, and sympathetic soldiers stationed nearby. Among them was Major Thomas Green, a man known for his tactical brilliance and unwavering loyalty to Washington. If Greene could verify the letter's authenticity and plan a controlled exposure, Caro's betrayal could be neutralized without alerting the British. That night, Mercer and Clara met Greene in the basement of a quiet tavern, the flicker of candlelight illuminating anxious faces. Mercer handed over the letters. Greene examined each one meticulously, his eyes narrowing as he pieced together the plot. "This is worse than I imagined," Greene muttered. "If Caro's plan succeeds, supply lines will be cut, and troops in the north could starve before the spring campaign even begins. We must act fast." The plan they devised was audacious. They would lure Caro into a staged meeting under the pretense of delivering sensitive intelligence, while Greene and a small contingent of patriots observed. Every detail was calculated: the time, the location, even the code words used in the letters. As the night approached, Mercer felt the familiar weight of fear and anticipation. Walking the streets to the rendezvous, he realized the revolution was no longer fought solely with muskets. Battles were now waged in shadows, in whispered conversations, in letters that could ignite or extinguish the flames of liberty. When Caro arrived at the abandoned warehouse near the river, he believed he was meeting a covert ally. But as the meeting unfolded, Greene and the others silently observed from concealed positions. Caro's arrogance and careless handling of the documents confirmed what Mercer and Clara had feared. By the end of the night, the trap was set, and Caro had walked right into it. Evidence in hand, Mercer and Greene prepared to present the betrayal to Congress, knowing the consequences could be severe, not just for Caro, but for the fragile unity of the revolutionary cause. In the cold dawn, as Philadelphia stirred to life, Mercer understood that the real battle for America was being fought in secrecy, in courage, and in choices made under the shadow of uncertainty. One misstep could unravel everything, and yet for the first time he felt a glimmer of hope, the hope that even in the darkest corners, truth and loyalty could prevail. Chapter 6. Flames of Treachery. Philadelphia was tense with anticipation. The morning fog clung to the streets like a shroud, hiding the movements of those who dared to act in secret. Johnathan Mercer and Clara Whitlock had spent the night compiling the evidence, ensuring that every letter, every note, and every coded message could withstand scrutiny. By mid-morning, they arrived at Independence Hall, the weight of history pressing down on them. Inside, delegates whispered in hushed tones, casting furtive glances toward Caro, whose face was pale and tight with anxiety. The papers Mercer handed over to Greene had been meticulously arranged, a timeline of communication, detailed correspondence, and a clear trail of clandestine meetings. Major Thomas Greene stepped forward, addressing the room. "Gentlemen, we have proof of treachery. Johnathan Caro has been in secret communication with British officers, actively working to sabotage our troops and weaken the Continental Army." A gasp echoed through the hall. Some delegates froze, others leaned in, eyes wide with disbelief. Caro's composure faltered, his lips twitched, but no words came. Mercer stood at the back, heart hammering. He had feared this moment, fear of failure, fear of retribution, but he also knew the truth could not remain buried. Clara's hand brushed his arm, steadying him. Caro attempted to protest, claiming misinterpretation and deceit, but the evidence was undeniable. Letters he thought were hidden were displayed, decrypted and read aloud, revealing his secret meetings and strategic betrayals. The consequences were swift. Caro was stripped of his position, placed under surveillance, and quietly removed from the inner circle of Congress. Yet the impact of his betrayal rippled far beyond Philadelphia. British officers, once unaware that their secret advantage had been compromised, were now forced to adjust their plans. Mercer realized that the small victory came at a cost. The British would now act with even more cunning, and the war's shadow games would only intensify. As Mercer and Clara walked through the streets afterwards, the city seemed both familiar and changed. Freedom remained a fragile dream, constantly threatened by those who sought power over principle. But there was also hope. Courage and loyalty, quietly exercised in the shadows, could alter the course of history. "Do you think it's over?" Mercer asked, glancing at Clara. "Over," she replied, a faint smile touching her lips. "No, it's only beginning. The real war is still out there, in the minds, in the hearts, and in the secrets that remain hidden." And as the sun rose over Philadelphia, the two of them vanished into the morning fog, aware that every choice they made, every secret uncovered, could tip the balance of a revolution that was far from over. Chapter 7. Shadows Across the Delaware. The British, furious over Caro's exposure, had begun tightening their grip on Philadelphia. Patrols were doubled, informants were everywhere, and whispers of spies infiltrating even the Continental Army filled the city with unease. Johnathan Mercer and Clara Whitlock understood that their work had only just begun. Major Thomas Green approached them in a quiet alley, his face grim. "The British are reorganizing," he said. "Caro was just one node. There are others, hidden figures in their network. If we don't act, they will strike at our supply lines again, and Washington's army could be crippled before the next campaign." Mercer clenched his fists. "Then we strike first." Their plan was audacious: to intercept a convoy carrying critical British intelligence scheduled to cross the Delaware River near Trenton. It was a small window of opportunity, fraught with danger. One misstep, and they would not just fail, they would be captured or killed. Under the cover of darkness, Johnathan Mercer and Clara Whitlock set out with a small team of trusted patriots. The night was frigid, the river current swift and treacherous, but every step was calculated. They knew the British would anticipate ordinary routes and timings, so they devised a diversion, lighting small flares along a hidden path to draw patrols away. As they approached the rendezvous point, Mercer's heart pounded in rhythm with the river. From the shadows, the convoy emerged, British officers and couriers, unaware that their movements were being tracked. Using silent signals, Mercer and Clara coordinated the ambush. The confrontation was swift and tense. No shots were fired initially. Every move relied on precision, stealth, and nerves of steel. When the first courier realized the trap, a brief skirmish erupted. Mercer, surprisingly agile for a scribe, grabbed the bundle of documents, narrowly avoiding capture. Clara covered him, striking a British officer with the blunt end of a musket. Within minutes, the convoy was neutralized, the intelligence secured, the Patriots vanished into the fog, leaving no trace but the echo of footsteps and the faint glow of flares. Mercer clutched the papers to his chest. The risk had been immense, but the reward was greater. Documents revealing British troop movements, supply caches, and plans to infiltrate the northern colonies. Back in Philadelphia, as they examined the intelligence, the scale of the British network became terrifyingly clear. Caro had only been a small piece of a much larger puzzle, a sprawling system of spies, couriers, and secret operatives operating across the colonies. Clara turned to Mercer, her expression sober. "We've won a battle tonight," she said, "but the war in the shadows is far from over, and soon they will come for us." Mercer nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. In the war for independence, courage, Secrecy and loyalty were as deadly as bullets, and as the night settled over Philadelphia, he knew the real fight, the fight that would define the future of America, was only just beginning. Chapter 8. Echoes of Conspiracy. Philadelphia was restless. News of the intercepted British convoy had reached Washington's inner circle, and whispers of Mercer and Clara's daring mission spread like wildfire among loyal patriots. Yet with victory came a new danger. The British intelligence network was adapting, striking back with shadows and subtlety that made every ally suspect and every letter potentially deadly. In the dim light of his room, Johnathan Mercer studied the documents from the convoy. Maps of troop movements, lists of covert operatives, coded messages detailing supply routes, all revealed the British network was far larger and more entrenched than anyone had imagined. He realized the war was no longer only fought on battlefields. It was a war of secrets, deception, and intelligence. Clara entered, carrying a letter slipped through a trusted courier. The envelope bore no stamp, no seal, yet the handwriting was familiar. It was from an unexpected ally, Margaret Meg Hawthorne, a British-born sympathizer living in New Jersey. She had infiltrated British circles for years, sending intelligence to the Continental Army. Meg's information could change everything, Clara whispered. She knows who's running the spy network in the northern colonies, and she's willing to cooperate. Mercer's pulse quickened. The opportunity was enormous, but danger lurked in every corner. The British had spies embedded in every town and port. Any misstep could reveal them all. That night, under the cover of darkness, Mercer and Clara met Meg in a secluded warehouse near the Delaware River. The woman's presence was striking, poised, fearless, and clearly accustomed to living under constant threat. "You've done well so far," Meg said, examining the convoy intelligence. "But this is only the beginning. The British are planning something larger than Caro could have imagined, a coordinated attack on multiple fronts, and they suspect there's a mole among their ranks. If we play our cards right, we can exploit that paranoia to our advantage." The three of them worked late into the night, mapping the British network, identifying vulnerabilities, and plotting their next moves. Every code broken, every message decoded, brought clarity and more peril. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the mist, Mercer understood that courage alone was not enough. To outmaneuver the British, they would need intelligence, subtlety, and the unshakable trust of those willing to risk everything for freedom. And in the coming days, every hidden move would matter, every whispered secret could become a weapon, and every shadow could harbor an enemy or an ally.
Chapter 9. The Silent Strike. The winter chill had deepened, and Philadelphia's streets were slick with frost. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, and Meg Hawthorne moved like ghosts through the city, each step measured, every sound scrutinized. The British network was growing more aggressive, and the trio knew that decisive action was required to dismantle a key spy cell operating near the Delaware docks. Major Thomas Green had prepared a plan, a silent strike to capture the couriers and intercept coded messages before they reached British command. The operation required absolute precision. One misstep could lead to capture or death and potentially expose the Continental Army's intelligence network. As night fell, Johnathan Mercer crouched behind stacked crates along the waterfront, the faint glow of lanterns reflecting off the icy river. Clara signaled with a discreet hand gesture. Couriers were approaching, carrying bundles of correspondence meant for British officers. Mercer's hand shook slightly as he retrieved a small knife and a bundle of rope. Meg positioned herself near the water's edge, ready to cut off escape routes. They had trained for this, but nothing could fully prepare them for the tension of facing live enemies in the dead of night. The first courier stepped into the trap. In a silent flurry, Clara and Mercer subdued him, binding him quickly and efficiently. The second followed, unaware that the shadows concealed their movements. Within minutes, the small team had captured 3 couriers and seized their correspondence. As they rifled through the letters, Mercer's eyes widened. The documents contained detailed British plans, troop movements, supply schedules, and coded instructions for espionage throughout New Jersey and Pennsylvania. This intelligence was priceless. It could turn the tide of multiple campaigns if delivered promptly to Washington. But victory came with peril. A sudden shout rang from the docks. A British patrol had spotted the flares used as diversion signals. The team acted swiftly. Meg created a smokescreen with lantern oil, while Mercer and Clara dragged the captives to a hidden dote. Pushing off into the icy Delaware, they vanished into the fog, the shouts and footsteps fading behind them. Back in a safe house, Mercer laid out the intercepted documents. Clara leaned over, eyes scanning rapidly. "This is bigger than we imagined," she murmured. "The British network is vast, and Clara was just one piece of it. But we now have a foothold, a way to destabilize their operations from within." Mercer exhaled, a mixture of relief and anticipation. Each operation was a gamble, each victory temporary, but the stakes were clear. The war for independence was fought not just on the battlefield, but in the shadows, with courage, intelligence, and calculated risk as their weapons. Meg's voice cut through the tense silence. "The next move is critical. If we make the wrong decision now, they will adapt and we could lose everything we've gained." Mercer looked out the window at the frozen river. Understanding the truth, history was being written not just in open battles, but in the silent strikes, in the coded messages, and in the shadows where few dared to tread. And the revolution depended on their next choices. Chapter 10. The Coded Revelation. Philadelphia had grown quiet in the early morning, the fog still thick over the Delaware, concealing both friend and foe. Johnathan Mercer sat hunched over a table in a safe house, the intercepted letters from the docks spread before him. Each page was filled with cryptic codes, carefully crafted to conceal the British network's operations, but Mercer knew that within those letters lay the key to dismantling an entire spy ring. Clara Whitlock pored over the documents beside him, her sharp eyes scanning for patterns. "She's using a layered cipher," she murmured. "Simple substitutions, false headers, and time-based codes. Whoever breaks this first could control the flow of information for months." Meg leaned in, tracing lines on a map with her finger. "The network extends from New York to the northern colonies. If we expose it, we can disrupt their supply lines and uncover the couriers. But there's a risk. The British may suspect a leak, and they'll tighten their security. Every second counts." Mercer worked feverishly, comparing recurring phrases, letter patterns, and references to dates and locations. Hours passed in tense silence, punctuated only by the scratching of quills and occasional murmurs. Slowly, a pattern emerged. A series of rendezvous points, names of operatives, and coded instructions for disrupting the Continental Army. "This is it," Mercer whispered, pointing at a sequence of letters that formed an acrostic revealing a hidden location, a warehouse near Trenton where a major British spy council was scheduled to meet. The realization hit them simultaneously. If they could intercept this meeting, they could decapitate the network in one strike. The team moved quickly, planning their approach with meticulous care. They could not risk a frontal attack. Stealth was essential. Under the cover of darkness, Mercer, Clara, and Meg traveled to the Trenton warehouse, using back roads, hidden paths, and a series of coded signals to communicate. From their vantage point, they observed the building. Guards patrolled methodically, unaware that patriots were watching from the shadows. Mercer held his breath as he handed Clara a set of notes detailing the guards' rotations, while Meg mapped potential escape routes. The operation required precision. Infiltrate, gather intelligence, escape undetected.
Each member of the trio had a role, every action choreographed down to the smallest detail. And as they prepared to move, Mercer understood a chilling truth. Failure would not just be personal, it could unravel months of careful planning and place the entire Continental Army at risk. As they slipped silently through the shadows toward the warehouse, the tension was palpable. The revolution was being fought not just with muskets and cannons, but with minds, courage, and the courage to act when the world slept. The night had just begun, and the secrets they were about to uncover could change the course of history.
Chapter 11. The Trenton Operation. The night air was bitter as Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, and Meg Hawthorne crouched in the shadows near the Trenton warehouse. The river's mist curled around their feet, muffling their movements. Every sense was alert, every heartbeat amplified in the stillness. This operation would determine the fate of the intelligence war. Failure was unthinkable. From their vantage point, they could see the building, guards patrolling in strict patterns, lanterns swinging with each step, the muffled voices of British officers inside. Meg whispered, "The council is inside. One wrong move and it's over. Stick to the plan." Mercer nodded, adjusting the small bundle of tools and coded documents he carried. Every item had a purpose: a lockpick, a grappling hook, and a set of papers meant to mislead the enemy if discovered. Clara checked her pistol, the cold metal reassuring in her hand. They slipped through a side entrance, unnoticed thanks to careful observation and the distraction of a small, strategically placed flare set by Meg. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, crates stacked high with supplies, and the faint scent of tobacco smoke lingering in the air. Through the shadows, they observed the council members, high-ranking officers discussing troop movements, intercepted intelligence, and plans for the next British campaign. Every word, every gesture was valuable. This was the intelligence they had risked everything to capture. Mercer moved forward silently, recording notes and memorizing codes. Clara neutralized a lone sentry with a swift, silent strike, while Meg positioned herself near the exit, ready to cover their retreat. The tension was almost unbearable. One misstep, one noise, could alert the entire council. Suddenly, a crate shifted under Mercer's foot. Time slowed as the sound echoed through the warehouse. One officer's head snapped in their direction. The room erupted in chaos. Voices shouted, lanterns swung, and the council scrambled. "Now!" Meg hissed. Mercer grabbed the critical documents and dashed toward the exit, Clara covering her flank. They raced through crates, dodging grasping hands and overturned barrels. Outside, the fog swallowed them, and the river awaited, a cold and uncertain path to safety. They pushed the captured intelligence into a waiting skiff, Meg pulling them aboard. The boat slipped silently into the darkness, leaving behind the chaos and British officers scrambling. For a moment, relief washed over them, but they knew it was temporary. The British network was vast, and while this operation was a victory, the war in the shadows was far from over. Back in Philadelphia, as dawn broke over the city, Johnathan Mercer and Clara Whitlock spread the captured documents on the table. Each paper revealed secrets that could change the course of the revolution. Spy networks dismantled, supply lines disrupted, and coded instructions now in the hands of patriots. Clara looked at him, exhausted but resolute. "We've won a battle tonight, but the war is just beginning. The British will adapt, and we'll have to be ready." Mercer stared out the window, watching the fog lift over the Delaware. History was being written in silence and shadows, in courage and cunning, and he knew that every decision, every risk, every secret uncovered could tip the scales of freedom for the colonies and for the future of a nation yet to be born. Chapter 12. Ripples of Intrigue. Philadelphia awoke under a gray sky.
the first light of dawn revealing the city an uneasy calm. Johnathan Mercer and Clara Whitlock worked tirelessly in their safe house, analyzing the intelligence captured from Trenton. Each document revealed new layers of the British spy network, but also hinted at a deeper, more dangerous threat. Someone within the colonies may have been feeding information to the enemy long before Caro's exposure. Meg traced lines on a map. "Look here," she said, pointing to a series of courier routes extending from New York down to Pennsylvania. They've been coordinating more than just supply lines. They're influencing local politics, Congress, even militia movements. There's a mole we haven't identified yet. Mercer's jaw tightened. The revolution was no longer just about armies clashing in the field. It was a war waged in whispers, letters, and shadows. Every ally could be a potential traitor. Every enemy could be a disguised friend. Suddenly, a discreet knock echoed at the door. Major Thomas Green entered, his face grim. "Washington has received our intelligence. The intercepted documents have prevented a potential disaster in the northern colonies. But he warns, the British are reorganizing. They know something has gone wrong, and they will strike back with more cunning than before." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Then we need to stay ahead. If they suspect a leak, they'll accelerate operations, and any misstep could cost lives and the revolution itself." The next days were a whirlwind of coded messages, secret meetings, and reconnaissance. Mercer, Clara, and Meg worked to identify the remaining spies, sending false intelligence to confuse the British while strengthening their own network. Every move required meticulous calculation. One error could compromise months of effort. Then a breakthrough came. A coded letter from an intercepted British courier revealed the location of a secret assembly in New Jersey. A council of high-ranking British officers and colonial collaborators planning a coordinated strike against multiple continental positions. The message was risky to act upon, but ignoring it could be catastrophic. "This is it," Meg said, her voice firm. "If we move fast, we can dismantle their operations before they launch their offensive, but the risk is extreme. This will be our most dangerous operation yet." Mercer felt the familiar mix of fear and determination. The stakes were higher than ever. The war's outcome, the lives of countless soldiers and patriots, and the fragile hope of independence, all balanced on the edge of this next mission. As night fell over Philadelphia, the trio prepared to depart, knowing that the coming days would test their courage, loyalty, and cunning to the limits. The shadows of war stretched far and wide, and the battle for America's freedom was now a war of intelligence, strategy, and secrets that could change history forever. Chapter 13. The Council at New Jersey. The night was pitch black, broken only by the distant glimmer of lanterns along the river. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, and Meg Hawthorne moved silently through the woods, the frost crunching softly beneath their boots. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. Every sound could betray their presence. This mission was unlike any they had undertaken before. Infiltrate a secret British council meeting in New Jersey and extract intelligence that could change the course of the war. Meg led the way, her knowledge of the terrain impeccable. "The council meets in an old manor on the outskirts," she whispered. "We'll have 2 routes in. The main entrance is heavily guarded, but the cellar has a hidden passage used by servants. That's our way." Clara tightened her grip on her pistol, scanning the darkness. "And if we're discovered?" "Then we disappear into the river," Mercer replied grimly. He had learned long ago that courage alone would not save them. Every move required precision, stealth, and calculation. They reached the manor, its windows dark but for the faint glow of candlelight inside. Using Meg's knowledge, they slipped into the hidden cellar passage, moving with the practiced silence of those accustomed to shadows. The air was damp and musty, and every creak of the wooden beams sounded amplified in the quiet. At the bottom of the passage, they found themselves in a small chamber beneath the manor. From a narrow grate, they could see the council gathered above, British officers and colonial collaborators discussing troop deployments, supply routes, and plans to crush the Continental Army's northern forces. Every word was a treasure trove of intelligence and a deadly risk if overheard. Mercer quickly began sketching a map of troop movements, while Clara and Meg memorized names and positions. Time was critical. They had to retreat before the meeting ended or risk discovery. Suddenly, a guard's boot echoed through the corridor above. The three froze. The footsteps grew closer. Mercer's pulse raced. They had no choice but to remain silent, pressed against the damp stone wall. The guard paused near the grate, then turned, narrowly missing the hidden observers. Once the danger passed, they exhaled quietly, tension lingering in every muscle. Minutes later, the meeting concluded. Mercer, Clara, and Meg retraced their path through the cellar, avoiding patrols and slipping back into the forest. The night air never felt so sweet as when they emerged on the other side, the manor safely behind them. Back in Philadelphia, they pored over the intelligence gathered. The council's plans were extensive: coordinated strikes on key supply depots, covert support to loyalist militias, and a network of spies ready to infiltrate continental positions. Mercer realized the scale of the British operation was staggering, and the revolution depended on them acting quickly and strategically. Clara spoke softly, almost to herself. Every step we take, every letter we intercept, every secret we uncover, it's all a gamble. But if we succeed, we could change the course of this war. Mercer nodded, eyes fixed on the maps and coded notes. History was being written not in grand speeches or public battles, but in the quiet courage of those who moved in the shadows. And the coming days would demand every ounce of their skill, bravery, and cunning. Chapter 14. The Counterstrike. The morning fog clung to Philadelphia as Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, and Meg Hawthorne gathered in their safe house. The intelligence from the New Jersey Council revealed a carefully orchestrated British operation, supply depots to be raided, loyalist militias mobilized, and covert infiltration planned across multiple colonies. The trio knew that acting quickly was not just necessary, it was a matter of survival for the revolution itself. Major Thomas Greene entered, his face grim. Washington has reviewed the intelligence. He's authorized a counter-operation, but it will require coordination, precision, and absolute secrecy. One mistake, and the British will regain the advantage they've lost. Meg spread the maps across the table, tracing the British supply routes with her finger. We'll strike simultaneously, she said. We intercept couriers, warn key depots, and sabotage their mobilization efforts. Every move must be timed to the minute. If we succeed, we cripple their network before they can react. If we fail, her words hung in the cold air, unspoken but understood. Mercer felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had grown accustomed to danger, but this operation was unprecedented in scale and risk. Lives and the fate of the revolution depended on their success. By nightfall, the team was ready. Clara and Mercer took positions along a major courier route, concealed beneath the shadows of abandoned warehouses. Meg coordinated a team near a supply depot in New Jersey, poised to intercept shipments and relay crucial intelligence. The first courier appeared, unaware of the trap. Mercer signaled Clara, and they moved silently, securing the letters and ensuring the British operatives were none the wiser. Each intercepted message revealed another layer of the British plan, reinforcements, hidden caches of weapons, and secret alliances with loyalist factions. Meanwhile, Meg's team successfully sabotaged a depot, removing critical supplies and sending coded messages to the Continental Army to redirect their resources. The operation was precise, swift, and almost silent, a testament to careful planning and nerves of steel. Hours later, as they regrouped in Philadelphia, Mercer spread the captured intelligence before them. "This is bigger than anything we've done," he said. "We've disrupted their entire chain of operations, but I fear this is only temporary. They will adapt, and we must be ready for their next move." Clara nodded. "The war is being fought not just with muskets, but with minds and courage in the shadows. And every step we take, every secret we uncover, brings us closer to freedom. And closer to danger. The British know we are interfering. Soon they will retaliate, and it won't just be against their armies. They'll come for us, and we must be ready." As dawn approached, the three of them watched the city awaken, knowing that the revolution was far from over. The silent battle of intelligence, courage, and loyalty would continue, shaping the destiny of a nation that had yet to be fully born.
Chapter 15. Shadows of Retaliation. The quiet of Philadelphia was shattered one evening by the distant thunder of hoofbeats and hurried footsteps. Johnathan Mercer had been reviewing the intercepted intelligence from the counterstrike, mapping British movements and loyalist activities, when Clara burst into the room, eyes wide with urgency. "They know," she whispered, clutching a folded letter. "The British have discovered our interference. They've sent a strike team to capture the messengers, and it's headed straight for us." Mercer's pulse quickened. They had anticipated retaliation, but the speed and intensity of this strike exceeded their worst fears. Meg appeared at the doorway, a lantern casting long shadows over her determined face. "We have minutes, not hours," she said. "We must evacuate and scatter. They'll be looking for patterns. Don't give them any." Quickly, they gathered the essential intelligence, coded letters, maps, and the few critical items they could carry. Every second counted. Mercer's hand trembled as he tucked the documents into a waterproof satchel. Failure now could undo months of painstaking work and cost countless lives. Outside, the streets were eerily silent, fog thickening around the cobblestones. The distant sound of British boots echoed through the alleyways. Mercer led the way, keeping to the shadows while Clara and Meg flanked him, eyes scanning for movement. Every corner held danger. Every sound could be a trap. They reached a narrow alleyway leading to the river, where a small skiff waited, partially hidden. Meg quickly unmoored the boat, while Mercer and Clara secured the intelligence. Just as they pushed off, torches flared behind them. British officers had discovered the safe house too late, but they were in pursuit. The river was icy and fast, but the skiff carried them silently through the fog. Mercer's mind raced, considering every possible route and contingency. The British would not give up easily. They were methodical, relentless, and highly trained. Survival depended on speed, cunning, and luck. After several tense minutes, the skiff reached a concealed landing spot upriver. Mercer, Clara, and Meg pulled the boat ashore, disappearing into the forest. Exhausted, wet, and shivering, they paused to catch their breath, realizing the gravity of the night's events. Meg broke the silence. "This is far from over. The British will come again, and next time they'll expect us. We've bought time, but the war in the shadows has escalated. Every move now must be precise, calculated, and fearless." Clara looked at Mercer, her eyes reflecting both determination and fatigue. She said, "We've faced death before, but now it's personal. They're after us, and we can't let them win. Not now, not ever." Mercer nodded, understanding that the revolution was no longer only about armies and battles. It was about survival,
intelligence, and courage in the shadows. And as dawn approached over the forest, the three of them vanished into the wilderness, ready to fight another day, knowing that the British were already plotting their next strike.
Chapter 16. An Unexpected Ally. The dense forest outside Philadelphia offered both cover and uncertainty. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, and Meg Hawthorne huddled around a small fire. The stolen intelligence spread across a blanket. The night had been brutal, but survival brought them only a brief reprieve. They knew the British would not stop. Meg studied the maps intently. The strike tonight confirms it. The British are reorganizing. They've identified our patterns, but not our methods. If we move strategically, we can turn this against them. Clara leaned back, exhaustion evident in her posture. We need allies. Someone inside their ranks who can feed us information. Without that, we're always reacting, never controlling the battlefield. Mercer's mind raced. For weeks they had operated in the shadows, relying on stealth and intelligence. Now the war was escalating beyond their capabilities. They needed an inside source. A sudden rustle in the underbrush made them tense. Every hand reached instinctively for weapons, every eye scanning the darkness. A figure emerged, a man, hooded and cautious, holding up a white cloth as a sign of peace. I mean you no harm, the man said softly. My name is Edward Langley. I am, or rather was, a British intelligence officer. I have my own reasons for helping you. There are factions within the British command who oppose the current strategy, and I can provide you with information, if you trust me. Mercer exchanged a glance with Clara and Meg. Trust had always been fragile, especially when lives depended on it. Yet the intelligence Edward offered could give them the upper hand they desperately needed. What do you want in return? Mercer asked cautiously. Only to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. The current British plan will cost thousands of lives on both sides, including civilians. I can guide you to intercept operations before they occur, but you must act fast. The window of opportunity is closing. Meg studied him, measuring the risk. We can't afford to ignore him, but if he betrays us... Edward's expression was solemn. I understand the stakes. I know your caution is justified, but my knowledge is real, and time is running out. After a tense pause, Mercer nodded. Very well. You'll guide us. But one misstep, and this alliance ends. The forest fell silent again, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Mercer realized that the revolution was no longer just a war of armies. It was a war of strategy, secrets, and fragile alliances. With Edward Langley's information, they could disrupt British operations on a scale previously unimaginable. Yet danger loomed closer than ever. The British had already adapted, and every move now carried deadly consequences. As dawn approached, Johnathan, Clara, Meg, and their new ally Edward prepared for the next phase of their shadow war, a battle that would test loyalty, courage, and the very limits of human ingenuity.
Chapter 17. Into the Lion's Den. The night was thick with fog as Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley approached the outskirts of a heavily guarded British outpost in New Jersey. The stakes had never been higher. With Edward's insider knowledge, they had discovered a critical supply depot and intelligence hub, the heart of the British spy network in the region. Remember, Edward whispered, his voice barely audible over the rustle of leaves. One mistake, and we're dead. Guards, patrols, and loyalist informants are everywhere. But if we succeed, we can cripple their operations and protect countless continental lives. Clara tightened her grip on her pistol. "Let's move," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. They prepped through the underbrush, avoiding the main paths. Edward led them to a service entrance used by British messengers and servants, a narrow door partially hidden behind crates and vines. Inside, the depot was dimly lit, the air thick with smoke and the scent of gunpowder. Mercer's heart raced as he observed officers handling letters, maps, and packages of supplies. Every item was potential intelligence, every conversation a clue. They needed to extract documents and data without raising an alarm, a near impossible task in a hive of activity. Edward whispered instructions. "Clara, cover the rear. Meg, distract the sentries near the northern wing. Mercer, follow me to the archive room. Every second counts." They split, moving like shadows through the building. Mercer and Edward reached the archive room, where rows of ledgers and correspondence awaited. Using Edward's insider knowledge, Mercer quickly located the most critical documents, troop movements, supply schedules, and coded communications between high-ranking British officers and colonial collaborators. Suddenly, a guard's footstep echoed down the hallway. Mercer froze, heart pounding. Clara's signal came, a subtle hand gesture, and Meg triggered a minor disturbance in the northern wing, drawing attention away from the archive room. The guard investigated, allowing Mercer and Edward to secure the documents and melt back into the shadows. With the intelligence in hand, the team retraced their steps through the labyrinthine corridors, exiting through the same hidden service door. The fog outside swallowed them once more, masking their retreat. Back at a safe house, they laid out the stolen intelligence. The scale of the British operations was staggering. Edward's guidance had allowed them to disrupt communications, uncover new spies, and seize critical logistical information. Clara exhaled, her voice tense but resolute. "We've struck a blow tonight, but they'll retaliate. They'll know someone infiltrated their hub, and next time it may be personal." Mercer nodded, realizing the truth. The war was evolving. No longer just muskets and cannons, it was strategy, stealth, and intellect. Each victory came with risk, each revelation with consequence, and the revolution depended on their courage, their cunning, and their ability to survive in a war fought in the shadows. As dawn approached, Mercer glanced at the fog-covered river, knowing that the coming days would demand every ounce of ingenuity, bravery, and loyalty. The fight for freedom was far from over, and the lion's den had only revealed the magnitude of the battle yet to come. Chapter 18. The Enemy Strikes Back. Philadelphia had grown tense with unease. Rumors swirled through the streets, whispers of captured couriers, intercepted letters, and a covert British operation targeting continental spies. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley knew the repercussions of their recent infiltration would come swiftly and with deadly precision. That night, as the team gathered in their safe house to analyze the intelligence taken from the lion's den, a sharp knock echoed at the door. Instantly, every hand went to weapons. Edward's eyes narrowed. No friendly courier operates this late. It's them. They found us. Before anyone could react further, the door burst open. Loyalist agents sent by British command flooded the room, torches blazing, muskets raised. Chaos erupted. Mercer grabbed the satchel containing the critical intelligence, diving toward a hidden trap door. Clara and Meg fought back fiercely, buying him precious seconds. Edward blocked one attacker, using his knowledge of British tactics to anticipate movements. They disappeared into the trap door, plunging into a narrow, damp tunnel beneath the safe house. The agents fired into the empty room, the sound of muskets echoing through the wooden floors above. Mercer's heart raced as they navigated the twisting corridors, emerging eventually into a concealed alley.
Outside, the fog of Philadelphia swallowed them once more, masking their retreat. Back at a hidden safe house, they laid out the stolen intelligence. The scale of the British operations was staggering. Edward's guidance had allowed them to disrupt communications, uncover new spies, and seize critical logistical information. Clara exhaled, her voice tense but resolute. "We've struck a blow tonight, but they'll retaliate. They'll know someone infiltrated their hub, and next time it may be personal." Mercer nodded, realizing the truth. The war was evolving. No longer just muskets and cannons. It was strategy, stealth, and intellect. Each victory came with risk, each revelation with consequence, and the revolution depended on their courage, their cunning, and their ability to survive in a war fought in the shadows. As dawn approached, Mercer glanced at the fog-covered river, knowing that the coming days would demand every ounce of ingenuity, bravery, and loyalty. The fight for freedom was far from over, and the lion's den had only revealed the magnitude of the battle yet to come. Chapter 18. The Enemy Strikes Back. Philadelphia had grown tense with unease. Rumors swirled through the streets, whispers of captured couriers, intercepted letters, and a covert British operation targeting continental spies. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley knew the repercussions of their recent infiltration would come swiftly and with deadly precision. That night, as the team gathered in their safe house to analyze the intelligence taken from the lion's den, a sharp knock echoed at the door. Instantly, every hand went to weapons. Edward's eyes narrowed. No friendly courier operates this late. It's them. They've found us. Before anyone could react further, the door burst open. Loyalist agents, sent by British command, flooded the room, torches blazing, muskets raised. Chaos erupted. Mercer grabbed the satchel containing the critical intelligence, diving toward a hidden trapdoor. Clara and Meg fought back fiercely, buying him precious seconds. Edward blocked one attacker, using his knowledge of British tactics to anticipate movements. They disappeared into the trapdoor, plunging into a narrow, damp tunnel beneath the safe house. The agents fired into the empty room, the sound of muskets echoing through the wooden floors above. Mercer's heart raced as they navigated the twisting corridors, emerging eventually into a concealed alley. Outside, the fog of Philadelphia swallowed them, masking their escape. But the British response had made one thing painfully clear. Their actions had been noticed, and the enemy was now hunting them personally. Retreating to another hidden safe house, the team regrouped. Edward unrolled a map, tracing British patrols and anticipated strike points. "They've consolidated forces," he said grimly. "They'll attempt to flush us out, not with open combat, but with intelligence warfare. Spies, informants, and traps. One wrong step, and it's over." Clara ran her hair through her hair. "We can't keep reacting. We need to go on the offensive, strike before they can corner us." Mercer's eyes hardened with determination. "Agreed. We've learned enough about their network. It's time to dismantle their operations, cell by cell, before they do more damage. But this will be our most dangerous mission yet." Meg studied the maps, her voice calm despite the tension. "We can exploit the paranoia Edward mentioned. They suspect a mole. If we feed them false intelligence while neutralizing key nodes in their network, we can turn their own caution against them. But it's risky. One mistake, and it will cost us everything." As dawn crept over the city, the team prepared for a series of covert operations that would test their courage, skill, and trust in each other. The revolution was no longer fought in open fields alone. It was a battle of shadows, of cunning, and of survival. The British had struck, but Mercer and his team were ready to answer in kind. And in the quiet streets of Philadelphia, the stage was set for a deadly game of espionage that could determine the fate of a nation.
Chapter 19. The Web Unraveled. The morning fog over Philadelphia concealed more than the city's cobblestone streets. It hid the daring plans of Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley. After the British strike, they knew time was running out. Every day of hesitation allowed the enemy to regroup and tighten their grip on the colonies. Edward spread a large map on the table, tracing key British courier routes and intelligence hubs. "We know the patterns," he said. "Now we exploit them. Simultaneous strikes across multiple locations will sow chaos in their ranks. Confusion will be our weapon." Clara studied the map, her finger hovering over several points. "If we hit these supply depots and intercept the couriers, we cripple their operations and buy the Continental Army crucial time. But timing has to be perfect. One misstep." Her voice trailed off. Mercer nodded. "Then we strike like shadows. No mistakes, no hesitation. Tonight, we cut the British network at its core." As night fell, the team split into 3 coordinated units. Mercer and Clara moved along the main courier routes, ambushing and securing critical correspondence. Meg led a team to sabotage supply depots, removing gunpowder, weapons, and provisions crucial to the British campaign. Edward infiltrated British communication centers, replacing genuine orders with false ones that would mislead the enemy and delay troop movements. The operations were swift, precise, and deadly effective. Each group moved like phantoms, leaving confusion and disruption in their wake. Couriers were intercepted silently. Supplies vanished or rerouted, and the British commanders were left bewildered by delays and conflicting orders. At one point, Mercer narrowly avoided detection when a patrol crossed his path. He held his breath, frozen in shadow, until the officers passed. The adrenaline coursing through him was intoxicating and terrifying. Every moment of stealth was a gamble with life itself. By dawn, the coordinated counter-espionage operation had succeeded beyond expectations. The British network was in chaos. Supply lines were disrupted, couriers delayed, and misinformation spread throughout their ranks. Mercer and the team regrouped in a hidden safe house, exhausted but elated. Meg broke the silence. "This is the turning point. For the first time, we've taken control of the intelligence war. The British don't know where to strike next, and that gives Washington a real advantage." Mercer nodded, her face lit by the first rays of sunlight. "We've won a battle in the shadows, but the war isn't over. They will adapt. They always do." Mercer looked at the maps, the documents, and the exhausted but determined faces of his companions. "True, but tonight we've shown that courage, cunning, and trust can tip the balance. The revolution depends on every victory like this." As Philadelphia slowly awakened, the 4 of them prepared for what lay ahead. The British would retaliate again, but the game had changed. The web of espionage was theirs to manipulate, and every move, every secret, every shadow could shape the future of a nation on the brink of freedom. Chapter 20. The Daring Pursuit. The British were in disarray. The coordinated counter-espionage operation had crippled their network, leaving confusion and mistrust in its wake. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley knew that the enemy would not accept defeat lightly. They would strike back with precision, vengeance, and cunning. Major Thomas Green arrived with urgent news. British forces are mobilizing a counter-offensive. They're searching for the mole who disrupted their operations. If they discover our involvement, the consequences will be catastrophic. Mercer studied the maps once more. "Then we act before they can regroup. Intelligence must reach Washington immediately, and we need to neutralize any remaining spy cells before they reorganize. This mission will be the most dangerous yet." Clara's eyes narrowed.
How dangerous? Potentially fatal, Edward admitted. We'll have to infiltrate a heavily guarded British command post in New Jersey. They fortified it after our previous operations. Detection is not an option. As night fell, the team moved with precision. Shadows masked their approach as they navigated hidden trails and narrow paths. The British command post loomed ahead, its walls guarded by sentries, lanterns, and watchtowers. Every step forward was a calculated risk. Meg signaled, and the team split into two groups. Mercer and Edward would infiltrate the command post to seize intelligence, while Clara and Meg provided cover and distractions outside. The operation required perfect timing, coordination, and nerves of steel. Inside, Mercer's pulse raced. He moved silently, observing officers poring over maps and dispatching orders. Edward whispered instructions, guiding him to the intelligence room. Mercer seized critical documents detailing troop deployments, supply chains, and future British operations. Suddenly, a guard approached. Mercer froze, barely breathing, as Edward signaled him to remain still. The guard paused, glanced around, and walked past. Mercer exhaled silently, clutching the documents. Meanwhile, Clara and Meg triggered subtle distractions outside. A minor fire, a loud crash, and fleeting shadows that lured sentries away from key positions. The chaos allowed Mercer and Edward to exit unnoticed, slipping into the surrounding woods. By dawn, the team had returned to Philadelphia, exhausted but victorious. The intelligence captured revealed the full scope of the British strategy, giving Washington's army an unprecedented advantage in planning future campaigns. Clara looked at Mercer, determination and awe in her eyes. We've struck a critical blow tonight, but the war is far from over. They'll be back, and they'll come harder. Mercer nodded, staring at the rising sun over the Delaware. True, but tonight, we've shown that courage, cunning, and loyalty in the shadows can change the course of history. The revolution isn't just fought on battlefields. It's fought in moments like this, in risks taken quietly, in choices made where few can see. Meg added, and we must remain vigilant. The British will adapt, but so will we. Every secret we uncover, every move we make, brings freedom one step closer. As Philadelphia awakened, Mercer and his companions prepared for the next phase of the Shadow War, a battle of intelligence, strategy, and courage that would determine the fate of a nation yet to be fully born.
Chapter 21. The Retaliation. The calm in Philadelphia was deceptive. The British, reeling from repeated disruptions, had devised a desperate and calculated counterattack. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley knew the danger was no longer abstract. The enemy was coming for them personally. Major Thomas Green arrived with grim news. British forces are converging on key safe houses. They've discovered traces of our operations, and loyalist informants have been mobilized. If we remain in one location too long, we'll be captured, or worse. Mercer's mind raced. Then we prepare. We split. We move strategically, and we force them into traps of our own making. This is their counterstrike, but we will turn it against them. As night fell, the team dispersed into separate cells. Johnathan Mercer and Clara took positions along the outskirts of Philadelphia, setting ambushes for any British patrols. Meg and Edward infiltrated loyalist networks, feeding false intelligence and creating diversions. The streets, alleys, and warehouses became a chessboard of shadows and deception. The first wave of British forces arrived under the cover of fog. Mercer and Clara, concealed in the shadows, waited patiently. A patrol approached, lanterns swinging, boots striking the cobblestones. With precision and silent coordination, they neutralized the officers, leaving no trace but confusion. Meanwhile, Meg and Edward executed a daring diversion at a supply depot. They created a minor explosion, carefully controlled,
to draw attention away from Mercer and Clara. The British, misled and disoriented, struggled to respond effectively. Hours of tense maneuvering culminated in a high-stakes confrontation near the Delaware River. A larger British contingent, alerted to the team's presence, attempted to encircle Mercer and Clara. Trapped between the river and the enemy, every step carried deadly consequences. Clara signaled, and Mercer understood. They pushed into the river, using the fog and the current to evade capture. The British officers, unable to anticipate their escape, were left stranded on the shore. Regrouping at a hidden safe house, the team counted their losses and victories. The British had come for them, but Mercer's leadership, Clara's courage, Meg's ingenuity, and Edward's insider knowledge had turned the enemy's plan against them. Meg studied the maps, exhaustion etched on her face. They'll recover, and they'll strike again, but we've bought the Continental Army precious time, and that's invaluable. Clara nodded. Every move we make, every secret we uncover brings us closer to victory, but we cannot underestimate them. The next strike will be even deadlier. Mercer looked out the window at the fog lifting over Philadelphia. History is being written not just on battlefields, but in these moments of courage, cunning, and survival. And tonight, we've ensured that the revolution continues.
Chapter 22. The Final Gambit. The streets of Philadelphia were eerily quiet as Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley convened in their largest safe house yet. The repeated British retaliations had demonstrated one truth: the enemy was relentless, adaptive, and deadly. If they were to secure a lasting advantage for the revolution, they needed a bold, decisive strike, one that would dismantle the British intelligence network once and for all. Edward spread a map across the table, tracing the locations of every known British spy cell, courier route, and supply depot. This, he said, pointing to the cluster near Trenton and Princeton, is the heart of their network. Take this out, and we cripple their ability to coordinate attacks. Their spies, their couriers, everything will collapse. But the risk... Clara interrupted, her voice sharp. The risk is death. We know that, but doing nothing guarantees more destruction. If we succeed, we give Washington's army a real chance. Mercer's jaw tightened. Then we strike on multiple fronts, simultaneously. Timing, precision, and secrecy are everything. Any misstep, and it's over for us, and possibly for the colonies. The plan was daring. Mercer and Clara would intercept the main courier lines, seizing intelligence as it moved between cells. Meg would lead a team to sabotage the British communication hubs, while Edward infiltrated the primary command center to feed false orders and misdirect reinforcements. Each move had to be perfectly timed, every second accounted for. As night fell, the team moved into position. Shadows became their allies, fog their shield. The first couriers approached, unaware of the trap laid for them. Mercer and Clara executed their interception flawlessly, capturing letters, coded messages, and logistical plans. Meanwhile, Meg's team sabotaged key supply depots, removing provisions, ammunition, and critical documents. Fires erupted as controlled diversions, drawing attention away from the main operation. Edward, inside the British command center, replaced critical orders with misinformation, causing confusion that would ripple through their entire network. Hours later, as dawn approached, the British intelligence network lay in chaos. Couriers were misdirected, supplies vanished, and the command structure had collapsed. Mercer and his team regrouped, exhausted but triumphant. Clara exhaled, leaning against a wall. We've done it. The network is broken. They'll have to rebuild from scratch, and we've given the Continental Army the advantage it needs. Mercer looked out over Philadelphia,
the first light of day illuminating the city's rooftops. This is more than a victory. It's a turning point. The British may regroup, but for the first time, the revolution has gained control in the shadows. Intelligence, strategy, and courage, these will win the war, not just muskets and cannons. Meg added, a faint smile breaking her tired expression. And we've proven that even in the deadliest shadows, a small group of patriots can change the course of history.
Chapter 23. Aftermath and Shadows. The streets of Philadelphia were quiet in the early morning, the fog lifting slowly over the Delaware. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley gathered in their safe house, reviewing the results of their daring strike. The British intelligence network had been shattered, couriers delayed, supply lines disrupted, and command structures in disarray. Yet victory brought no relief. Edward's brow was furrowed as he traced troop movements on the map. They're reorganizing, he warned. They'll adapt to our strategies, recover from the losses, and retaliate. And this time, they'll be more cautious, more lethal. Clara looked over at Mercer. So, we've slowed them down, but they won't stop. How do we prepare for the next wave? Mercer took a deep breath. We anticipate, we adapt, and we stay invisible. The revolution is no longer just open battle. It's survival, strategy, and intelligence. We've gained the advantage, but the game isn't over. As the team strategized, reports arrived. British officers were suspicious of their own loyalist informants, mistrust spreading through the ranks. Some loyalists began questioning their commanders, unsure if they were being manipulated. The ripple effects of Mercer's operation were spreading farther than anyone had predicted. Meg, exhausted but resolute, pointed to a series of letters and dispatches. These intercepted communications indicate potential collaborators in New Jersey and New York. If we act carefully, we can turn them against the British, or at least neutralize their influence. Mercer nodded. This is the next phase. Intelligence is the battlefield now. Every decision, every secret, every alliance matters more than any musket or cannon. That evening, as the team moved through the fog-laden streets to distribute the intelligence they had gathered, Mercer reflected on the personal toll of their actions. Lives had been risked, near captures narrowly avoided, and each mission had tested their courage and loyalty. The shadows of war were relentless, but so was their determination. Clara broke the silence. Do you ever wonder if the sacrifices we make are enough? If we're really changing the course of history? Mercer's eyes softened. Every letter intercepted, every plan foiled, every life protected, those are the victories we won't see in history books. But they matter, and they will ripple forward, shaping the world we fight for. Edward added quietly, the British will adapt, yes, but now they doubt their own network. That doubt is as dangerous as any weapon, and it's ours to exploit. As night deepened over Philadelphia, the four of them disappeared once more into the city's shadows. The revolution continued, fought not only in battlefields and Congress halls, but in the silent courage of spies, patriots, and those willing to risk everything for freedom. For Mercer and his companions, the war in the shadows was far from over, and the choices they made next could determine the fate of a nation yet to be born. Chapter 24. Shadows over New York. The city of New York was a fortress of loyalists, British officers, and spies. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley knew that the intelligence victories in Philadelphia were only the beginning. To ensure the revolution's success, they had to strike at the heart of the enemy's operations in New York, a city teeming with danger and deception. Edward spread a detailed map across the table. The British network here is vast and well organized. Couriers, informants, military officers, all connected. If we can disrupt it, we cut off a critical supply and intelligence hub and force the British to divert resources from the northern front. Clara's eyes narrowed. And the risk? Edward's expression was grave. Extreme. Discovery could mean death, and the city is crawling with spies who won't hesitate to betray anyone they suspect. Meg added, then we must move carefully, like shadows. No patterns, no predictable movements, and we need local contacts who can guide us safely through the city. With the plan set, the team infiltrated New York under the cover of darkness. The streets were narrow, crowded with loyalists and British soldiers. Every shadow was a potential threat, every alley a possible trap. They relied on secret signals, trusted informants, and Edward's insider knowledge to navigate the city safely. Their first target was a courier hub known to transport critical British orders. Mercer and Clara struck swiftly, intercepting messages and replacing them with false instructions that would misdirect British reinforcements. Meanwhile, Meg sabotaged key supply warehouses, carefully removing ammunition and provisions without leaving a trace. As the night progressed, the team discovered a deeper threat, a double agent embedded within the loyalist network, feeding information to both sides. The revelation was chilling. If unmasked, this agent could expose the entire continental spy network. Edward whispered urgently, "This complicates everything. If the British discover we've identified the double agent, they'll accelerate their operations. We must act carefully to turn this situation to our advantage." Using the intercepted intelligence and careful misdirection, Mercer's team orchestrated a series of subtle manipulations. Loyalist spies were misled, British reinforcements were delayed, and the double agent was contained without blowing their cover. Every move was precise, every action calculated to minimize risk and maximize impact. By dawn, the team had achieved a critical victory. The British network in New York was destabilized, their communications disrupted, and the city itself thrown into confusion. Yet the danger remained palpable. The enemy was adapting faster than ever, and every mission carried the possibility of deadly consequences. Clara looked at Mercer, tension and exhaustion in her eyes. "We've won tonight, but the war is far from over. They'll recover, and they'll come for us with more force." Mercer nodded. "True, but tonight we've struck a blow that will be felt across the colonies. Intelligence, courage, and cunning are proving to be just as powerful as any army." Meg added, "And the shadows are ours. As long as we move wisely, we can continue to turn the tide of this revolution one secret at a time." As the sun rose over New York, Mercer and his companions vanished into the city's hidden pathways, ready for the next chapter of the Shadow War, a war fought not only with weapons, but with minds, courage, and the silent power of information.
Chapter 25. The Hidden Strategy. The hidden safe house in New York offered little comfort. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley pored over the intelligence intercepted the previous night. Among the letters, coded messages, and supply lists, a pattern emerged, one that chilled them to the bone. Edward pointed at a set of instructions sent between British officers. "They're planning a concentrated strike on key continental positions along the Hudson River. If executed, it could split Washington's forces, capture vital supplies, and crush morale." Clara's hand tightened around her pistol. "This is more than sabotage. It's a decisive campaign. If they succeed, we lose the North entirely." Mercer studied the documents carefully, tracing the routes and timelines. "We have a narrow window. They plan to move within a week. We need to act immediately, intercept couriers, warn the Continental Army, and neutralize key British operatives before they can execute this plan." Meg frowned. "The operation is risky. They're alert, and the network here is extensive. One misstep, and the information we've gathered could be lost, or worse, lead them straight to us."
Edward spoke quietly, his tone grave.
"There's also the matter of a traitor inside the loyalist ranks, someone who may have realized we're on to them. We must move carefully. Exposure would be catastrophic."
That night, the team split into multiple cells. Mercer and Clara shadowed a primary courier route, intercepting critical dispatches. Meg and Edward infiltrated a British logistics hub, subtly sabotaging communications and delaying troop movements. Every step was timed with precision, every action executed with meticulous care. As they worked, Mercer realized the stakes were higher than ever. Lives, the fate of the revolution, and the fragile advantage they had painstakingly gained all depended on the success of this operation. Failure was not an option. Hours later, as the first light of dawn illuminated the city, Mercer and his team reconvened. The intercepted intelligence had been delivered safely to Washington's commanders. British plans were delayed and disrupted, and the loyalist traitor had been contained. Clara exhaled, tension evident in her posture. "We've bought time, but the British will recover. They'll come back stronger, and we have to be ready." Mercer nodded, determination in his eyes. "Tonight proves one thing. Intelligence, courage, and strategy in the shadows can alter the course of history. The revolution isn't just fought with muskets, it's won by those willing to risk everything in silence." Edward added, "And as long as we stay vigilant, the enemy can never fully control the narrative. This is a turning point, but we must remain relentless." As the team prepared to disappear into the hidden alleys of New York, Mercer reflected on the immense weight of their actions. The revolution's success depended not just on battles, but on courage, cunning, and the quiet victories won in the shadows. And for now, Mercer and his companions had ensured that freedom still had a chance. Chapter 26. The Betrayal Within. The safe house in New York had never felt more claustrophobic. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley gathered around the map, reviewing the intelligence they had meticulously collected over weeks. But an uneasy tension hung in the air. Something was off. Edward's hand hovered over a set of documents. "I've noticed anomalies in recent intercepted messages. Someone is feeding selective information back to the British, but it's not obvious who." Clara's eyes narrowed. "A mole in our midst. If we don't identify them quickly, everything we've accomplished could be undone." Mercer ran his hair through his hair, mind racing. "We can't act recklessly. One wrong accusation could destroy the trust we've built, and losing trust is as dangerous as losing a battle." Meg studied the maps and notes, her voice tense. "The pattern is subtle, carefully placed misinformation, slight delays in courier routes, inconsistencies in loyalty among some contacts. Whoever it is knows enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be obvious." Over the next 2 nights, the team conducted careful surveillance within their own ranks, observing movements, questioning contacts, and testing reactions to planted information. Each step was a delicate balance between uncovering the traitor and maintaining operational security. The breakthrough came when Edward intercepted a coded message being passed through a trusted courier. The handwriting, the phrasing, it all pointed to someone they considered an ally. Mercer confronted the suspect in a dimly lit alley behind the safe house. "We know what you've been doing," he said quietly, his voice steady but cold. "Who are you working for?" The traitor's face paled, realizing their deception had been uncovered. I didn't want anyone to get hurt," they stammered. "I thought I could control it, but it spiraled out of control. They threatened my family." Clara stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Your fear doesn't justify betrayal. Lives are at stake.
The revolution depends on loyalty, courage, and trust. Mercer made the decision swiftly, balancing justice with pragmatism. The traitor was neutralized, detained, and prevented from causing further damage, but the emotional toll lingered. Betrayal from within was a wound deeper than any battle. Edward spoke softly, breaking the silence. This is the harsh reality of espionage. Even those we trust can falter, but now we know and we can adjust. The British will not have this advantage again. Meg added, her tone resolute. We move forward, stronger, smarter, more vigilant. Every operation from now on will account for what just happened. As dawn broke over New York, Mercer and his team reassembled, their resolve hardened by the betrayal. The revolution was fought not just against muskets and cannons, but against deception, fear, and human frailty. And the shadows they moved in demanded constant vigilance, courage, and unwavering loyalty. For Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward, the path ahead was more dangerous than ever before, but the stakes had never been higher, and the cost of failure could now be measured in both lives and the fragile hope of freedom.
Chapter 27. The Preemptive Strike. The morning fog over New York concealed both danger and opportunity. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley were already in motion, analyzing intelligence gathered after the betrayal. The British, shaken by previous disruptions and internal leaks, were planning a large-scale offensive along the Hudson, a strike that could devastate continental forces if allowed to proceed. We have less than a week before they move, Edward said, tracing routes on a map. If we act decisively, we can preempt the attack, misdirect their troops, and weaken their positions. But the risks, Clara cut him off, her eyes hard with determination, are the same risks we've been taking from the start. If we succeed, it changes the course of the war. If we fail, countless lives are lost. We don't have the luxury of hesitation. Mercer nodded. We strike on multiple fronts simultaneously. I'll lead the operation to intercept troop movements and secure key dispatches. Clara and Meg will handle diversions and sabotage. Edward, you manipulate their communications to delay reinforcements. Timing is everything. That night, the team moved through New York's labyrinthine streets and hidden pathways. Shadows were their allies, fog their shield. Johnathan and Clara shadowed British supply lines, quietly intercepting couriers and rerouting them with falsified orders. Meg infiltrated a loyalist warehouse, carefully destroying munitions and provisions, while Edward used his insider knowledge to feed false intelligence into British command channels. Hours of tense maneuvering culminated in a dramatic confrontation near a British encampment along the Hudson. Mercer's team, concealed in the shadows, observed troop movements. They struck decisively, seizing critical dispatches and sabotaging key supplies without alerting the entire camp. The British were thrown into confusion. Misinformation caused delays, conflicting orders, and misdirected reinforcements. The Continental forces, guided by the intelligence Mercer had secured, were able to fortify key positions and anticipate enemy movements. By dawn, the operation was complete. The preemptive strike had neutralized the immediate threat, leaving the British off balance and giving Washington's army a critical strategic advantage. Clara exhaled, tension easing slightly. We've done it. For now, we've turned the tables, but the British won't forget or forgive what we've done. Mercer surveyed the city from a quiet rooftop, the rising sun casting long shadows over the streets. Tonight proves that intelligence, courage, and calculated risk can win battles before they are fought. But the revolution is far from over. Every success brings new dangers, and the enemy will adapt. And we must adapt faster. Every mission, every choice, every shadow we move through is part of a larger game. One wrong move, and all we've accomplished could unravel.
Edward nodded solemnly. But we've shown them that the Patriots can strike back, that fear and caution can be turned against them. The tides of war are shifting, and the British now know that the Revolution's shadow warriors cannot be underestimated. Chapter 28. The British Reckoning. The streets of New York were unnervingly quiet, the calm before a storm. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley knew that their preemptive strike had enraged the British command. Intelligence reports indicated that a massive, coordinated counteroffensive was underway, targeting both Continental forces and shadow operatives in the city. Edward's face was grave as he spread the latest intercepted communications across the table. They've mobilized several battalions, loyalist militias, and intelligence agents. Their objective is clear: root out every Patriot operative, including us, and regain control. They're coming with everything they have. Clara clenched her fists. This is bigger than anything we faced. If they succeed, it could undo months of work, and countless lives will be lost. Mercer's jaw tightened. Then we must not wait. We must strike first. Divide, distract, and neutralize. Our survival and the revolution depend on it. The team split into coordinated units. Mercer and Clara moved through hidden routes to intercept British intelligence couriers and misdirect key units. Meg orchestrated controlled diversions, setting fires and explosions to draw enemy forces into traps, while Edward infiltrated the British command to manipulate orders and sow confusion. Hours of tense maneuvering led to a climactic confrontation near the Brooklyn waterfront. Mercer's group observed a column of British soldiers advancing, unaware that they had been led into a trap designed by Meg and Edward. Hidden in the shadows, the team struck swiftly, seizing dispatches, sabotaging supplies, and forcing the enemy to retreat in disarray. Amid the chaos, Mercer faced a personal threat. A high-ranking British officer, tipped off about the Patriot movements, confronted him directly. Mercer relied on years of skill, experience, and quick thinking to evade capture, narrowly escaping with the critical intelligence. By dawn, the coordinated retaliation had been blunted. British forces were in confusion, morale was shaken, and the Patriots had secured another strategic advantage. Yet the cost was evident: exhaustion, injuries, and the knowledge that the enemy would not relent. Clara looked at Mercer, her face lined with tension and relief. We've survived, but they'll be back, stronger, smarter, and angrier. Mercer nodded. True, but tonight proves that even against overwhelming force, intelligence, courage, and unity can prevail. The revolution is fought in the shadows as much as on battlefields, and we've shown that we can win in both arenas. Edward added quietly, We've gained time, disrupted their plans, and shown them that the Patriots cannot be crushed. But we must remain vigilant. The British will adapt, and the next strike may be even deadlier. Meg, surveying the smoldering diversions in the distance, whispered, And we'll be ready, always ready. As the sun rose over New York, Mercer and his team disappeared into the city's hidden pathways, knowing that the British would not forgive or forget, and that the next confrontation could determine the fate of the revolution itself. Chapter 29. The Conspiracy Unveiled. The city of New York still bore the scars of the previous night's chaos. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley convened in a concealed safe house, reviewing intelligence seized during the British retaliation. Among the intercepted letters and coded communications, a shocking revelation emerged. a secret British conspiracy designed to undermine the entire colonial effort. Edward's voice was grim as he traced a route on the map. They're not just targeting the Continental Army. There's a coordinated plan to incite loyalist uprisings, sabotage supply lines, and assassinate key revolutionary leaders. If they succeed, the colonies could collapse before the war even reaches its peak. Clara's eyes widened. This is far beyond anything we faced. It's a complete campaign to destroy the revolution from within. Mercer's mind raced. Then we have no choice. We must infiltrate the heart of this conspiracy, identify the planners, disrupt their operation, and secure the intelligence before it's too late. It will be dangerous, but there's no alternative. Meg studied the maps, her voice tense but steady. The plan spans several colonies. We can't hit everything at once. We need to focus on the core, where the intelligence is being coordinated. That's where we strike. Edward nodded. There's a heavily fortified British intelligence headquarters near Staten Island. It's where orders are drafted, spies are deployed, and loyalist networks are coordinated. If we can penetrate it, we can unravel the entire conspiracy. That night, the team prepared for the mission of a lifetime. Stealth, strategy, and coordination were paramount. Johnathan would lead the infiltration. Clara and Meg would provide diversions and cover, and Edward's insider knowledge would guide them through the labyrinth of enemy defenses. The journey to Staten Island was fraught with danger. British patrols, loyalist informants, and treacherous terrain threatened to expose them at every step. Yet Mercer and his team moved like shadows, silent and precise, their nerves steel strong with purpose. Upon reaching the headquarters, they observed from a hidden vantage point. Guards, lanterns, and sentries formed a deadly perimeter. Using the cover of darkness and careful timing, the team executed a daring infiltration, slipping past sentries, evading traps, and navigating the fortified corridors. Inside, they discovered a trove of intelligence, detailed plans to destabilize the colonies, lists of collaborators, and orders for targeted strikes. Mercer quickly secured the documents, while Clara and Meg created diversions, setting small controlled fires and drawing guards away from critical areas. Suddenly, a high-ranking British officer appeared, realizing the intrusion. Mercer and the officer engaged in a tense, silent struggle. Using his skill and cunning, Mercer subdued the officer, ensuring the operation remained covert. By dawn, the team had successfully exfiltrated with the intelligence, leaving chaos behind for the British to discover. The conspiracy had been exposed, its plans disrupted, and the Continental forces now held the advantage. Clara exhaled, exhaustion mixed with relief. We've done the impossible, but at what cost? Mercer looked out toward the rising sun, determination in his eyes. The revolution depends on actions like this. Courage, intelligence, and risk are what will shape our future. Tonight proves that even the most hidden threats can be defeated if we act decisively. Edward added quietly, and the British now know that the Patriots will strike at the heart of any conspiracy. They may retaliate, but the advantage has shifted. The game is ours to control if we remain vigilant. Meg smiled faintly, eyes glinting with resolve. Then let them come. We're ready for whatever comes next. As they disappeared into the morning fog, Mercer and his companions understood that the shadows they moved through were the true battleground of the revolution, and that the next mission would demand every ounce of skill, courage, and loyalty they possessed.
Chapter 30. The Uprising Thwarted. The intelligence gathered on Staten Island had revealed the full scope of the British conspiracy. Loyalist militias were being mobilized across several colonies, with plans to spark uprisings that could destabilize the revolutionary effort entirely. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley knew that failure was not an option. The mission ahead would test every skill, every ounce of courage, and every bond of trust they had forged. Edward laid out the plan in a dimly lit safe house. The uprisings are scheduled to occur simultaneously within the next 48 hours. If we intercept the communications and sabotage the coordination, we can prevent them from igniting widespread chaos. But we'll be operating in heavily monitored territory. Detection will be fatal. Clara's eyes flashed with determination. Then we move tonight. We have no time for hesitation. Every delay risks disaster. Mercer nodded. We split into teams. Meg and I will infiltrate the main loyalist stronghold in New Jersey to disrupt the central coordination hub. Clara and Edward will intercept communications and misdirect regional leaders. Timing and precision are everything. Under the cover of darkness, the teams moved through forests, hidden paths, and secret waterways. The air was tense with anticipation. Every sound, a distant hoofbeat, the rustle of leaves, could betray them. Mercer and Meg approached the New Jersey stronghold, observing sentry patterns and guard rotations. Using a combination of stealth, decoys, and distraction, they slipped inside the fortified building, avoiding detection. Inside, they located the central communication room and began intercepting orders, replacing them with false messages that would delay and confuse the loyalist leaders. Meanwhile, Clara and Edward moved through New York and the surrounding areas, subtly influencing couriers, intercepting letters, and planting misinformation that would redirect rebel leaders away from the planned uprising. Their actions required nerves of steel, precise timing, and unwavering focus. As the first coordinated uprisings began to ignite, confusion spread rapidly among the loyalists. Orders contradicted each other, troops were delayed or misdirected, and the carefully planned revolt began to collapse. Mercer and Meg ensured the hub's critical infrastructure was disrupted, leaving the British unable to coordinate further efforts. By dawn, the potential uprisings had been effectively thwarted. Across multiple colonies, chaos was averted, loyalist forces were disorganized, and the continental leadership received crucial intelligence that allowed them to prepare defenses in advance. Clara exhaled, relief mingled with exhaustion. We did it. We prevented a disaster that could have changed the course of the war. Mercer looked out over the landscape, determination etched in his features. Tonight proves that intelligence, courage, and strategic action can save countless lives and preserve the revolution. The battlefield is not always a field. It's the shadowed paths, the hidden letters, the unseen maneuvers that shape history. Meg smiled faintly. And we've proven that even the most dangerous conspiracies can be stopped if you act decisively, without fear. Edward nodded. The British will recover and retaliate, but now they know the Patriots are not just soldiers, they are strategists, spies, and guardians of freedom. They cannot win this war without accounting for us. As the sun rose over the colonies, Mercer and his companions disappeared once more into the shadows, aware that the revolution's future depended on every calculated risk, every act of courage, and every mission executed in secrecy. The war was far from over, but the tide was shifting, and they were at the forefront of the fight for America's freedom.
Chapter 31. The Final Offensive. The Continental forces were cautiously optimistic. Thanks to Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward, several British operations had been disrupted. Uprisings had been prevented, and intelligence networks had been fractured. Yet the British were not defeated. They were enraged. A massive counteroffensive was imminent, aimed at crushing the shadow network that had embarrassed them repeatedly. Edward spread a map across the table, marking troop movements and likely targets. They've consolidated forces in New York and New Jersey. Loyalist militias and regular British battalions will move in unison. Their goal is to eliminate the Patriot intelligence network and strike key continental positions simultaneously. Clara's voice was firm. Then we must anticipate every move, intercept every communication, and neutralize key threats before they strike. This is our chance to end the Shadow War on favorable terms. Mercer's gaze hardened. We'll split into teams. I lead the operation to disrupt their main force and intercept intelligence at the source. Clara and Meg
will handle diversions and sabotage secondary operations. Edward will manipulate their communications, feeding false orders to create confusion. As night fell, the teams moved into position. The air was thick with fog, masking their movements as they infiltrated British encampments and patrols. Every step was fraught with danger. One miscalculation could mean capture or death. Mercer and Clara observed the main encampment from a ridge. Using information provided by Edward, they anticipated guard rotations and troop movements. When the time was right, they struck swiftly, neutralizing sentries, seizing critical dispatches, and planting subtle disruptions designed to delay the British offensive. Meanwhile, Meg and Edward worked in parallel, infiltrating supply depots, sabotaging munitions, and misdirecting reinforcements. Each success amplified the confusion within the British ranks, preventing them from mounting a coordinated attack. At the height of the operation, Mercer confronted a high-ranking British officer, a man responsible for coordinating multiple strikes. Using both stealth and strategy, Mercer incapacitated the officer and secured vital intelligence, turning the enemy's plan completely on its head. By dawn, the counteroffensive had been effectively neutralized. British forces were in disarray, morale was shaken, and the shadow network that had so long protected the Continental Army had triumphed. Clara exhaled, exhaustion evident. "We've stopped them. The offensive is over before it began." Mercer surveyed the battlefield, quiet now, the aftermath of calculated maneuvers and daring operations evident in the disorganized camps and misdirected forces. "This is what we've been fighting for. The revolution depends not just on courage in battle, but intelligence, strategy, and unwavering resolve in the shadows." Meg added, "And we've proven that even against overwhelming force, a small, determined team can change the course of history." Edward nodded. "The British will regroup, yes, but they now know that patriots strike not only with muskets, but with minds. The Shadow War belongs to us, for now." As the sun rose over New York and New Jersey, Mercer and his team disappeared into the foggy streets and hidden paths once more, knowing that freedom had been preserved through cunning, bravery, and unbreakable loyalty. The revolution was far from over, but its tide had been turned.
Chapter 32. Shadows Consolidated. The dawn over New York cast long shadows across the city streets, and Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley gathered in their largest safe house yet. The British counteroffensive had been thwarted, the loyalist networks destabilized, and the Continental Army now held the decisive advantage. Yet Mercer knew the war in the shadows was far from over. Edward spread the latest intelligence across the table. The British are regrouping. While the main counteroffensive failed, smaller operations, loyalist sympathizers, and hidden agents remain active. We cannot assume victory yet. Clara leaned over the map, her eyes sharp. Then we strike preemptively, identify their remaining cells, misdirect communications, and secure the intelligence network. We've learned that information is more powerful than any cannon. Mercer nodded. Agreed. We consolidate our gains and eliminate lingering threats systematically. Every safe house, every courier route, every agent must be accounted for. The revolution depends on it. Meg added, we also need to ensure the colonies themselves are aware of our operations. If we can coordinate with local leaders while maintaining secrecy, the Patriots gain a strategic advantage that can't be undone. Over the next few days, the team executed a series of careful operations, intercepting remaining loyalist couriers, ensuring that no critical information reached the British, disrupting hidden supply caches, preventing weapons and provisions from reaching enemy sympathizers. recruiting and coordinating local patriot cells, turning potential threats into allies, feeding false intelligence into British channels, reinforcing confusion and mistrust within their ranks. Each mission tested their skills, courage, and teamwork. Even small mistakes could unravel months of effort, but the team moved with precision, relying on experience and unbreakable trust. By the end of the week, Mercer assessed the results. We've neutralized nearly every lingering threat in New York and New Jersey. The British spy network has been decimated, loyalist operations are in disarray, and our intelligence advantage is unmatched. The revolution is in a stronger position than ever before. Clara exhaled, a mixture of relief and determination on her face. We've gained ground, but vigilance is still required. The British will attempt to rebuild, and they will not forgive us for what we've done. Edward nodded. True, but they now know that the Patriots are not just soldiers. They are strategists, spies, and masters of the shadows. The tide of this war has shifted, and the advantage is ours to maintain. Mercer smiled faintly, glancing at the maps and intercepted communications. Then let's make sure they never recover. Every cell, every courier, every loyalist agent we neutralize brings freedom one step closer. As the sun set over the colonies, Mercer and his companions vanished once more into the hidden alleys, forests, and riverways. Their work in the shadows was far from over, but for the first time they had truly consolidated power, shaping the Revolutionary War in ways the world would never fully see. For Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward, the Shadow War had become their battlefield, their proving ground, and the foundation upon which the future of a free America would be built. Chapter 33. The Heart of the Enemy. The safe house was tense. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley had spent weeks consolidating gains, neutralizing loyalist threats, and dismantling British networks. Yet the intelligence Edward had intercepted that morning chilled them all. "They're targeting the Continental leadership directly," Edward said, his finger tracing a coded letter. "Washington himself, along with key generals, are being marked for sabotage and potential assassination. If they succeed, everything we've worked for could collapse in an instant." Clara's hands clenched. "Then there's no time to wait. We strike at the heart of this operation. We can't just defend. We must distract, dismantle, and neutralize their leadership before they act." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Agreed. This will be our most dangerous mission yet. We're moving into the epicenter of the British conspiracy. One mistake, and it could cost all our lives, and the revolution itself." Meg's expression was grim but determined. "Then we move with precision, distraction, stealth, infiltration, and deception. Everything we've learned culminates here." Edward nodded. "I've identified a fortified British intelligence hub in New Jersey. From there, orders are disseminated, assassins coordinated, and loyalist uprisings planned. If we infiltrate it, we can dismantle the operation entirely and protect the leadership." Under the cover of night, Mercer and his team moved silently through forests, rivers, and hidden trails. Every patrol, every sentry, every loyalist informant presented a potential threat. They relied on stealth, signaling, and years of experience to evade detection. Mercer and Clara infiltrated the British hub, moving like shadows through guarded corridors. Meg orchestrated diversions outside, creating controlled chaos to draw guards away. Edward manipulated communications from a nearby vantage, feeding false orders that delayed reinforcements and created confusion. Inside, Mercer discovered detailed plans to strike at Continental leadership locations, along with rosters of loyalist agents ready to execute them. Using quick thinking and precise action, he sabotaged the operation, securing intelligence and eliminating key threats before they could be activated. A high-ranking British officer suddenly appeared, realizing the infiltration. Mercer engaged in a tense, silent struggle, using both skill and cunning to neutralize the threat without raising an alarm. Clara assisted, subduing guards and covering their escape. By dawn, the British plot had been completely dismantled. Loyalist agents were misdirected, assassination plans thwarted, and the Continental leadership remained safe. Clara exhaled, tension melting into relief. We've stopped them. The revolution is safe, for now. Mercer looked at the horizon, determination etched in his features. Tonight proves that courage, intelligence, and loyalty can protect even the most critical moments in history. The shadows we move through have become the true battlefield of freedom. Meg added, and we've shown that even the most carefully laid plans by the enemy can be unraveled with skill, strategy, and bravery. Edward nodded. The British may regroup, but now they know the Patriots strike with precision, intelligence, and foresight. The tide of this war is shifting irreversibly. As the sun rose over New Jersey, Mercer and his team disappeared into hidden paths, their role in shaping the revolution more critical than ever. The war in the shadows had reached its climax, but the future of a free America now rested in the hands of those willing to fight unseen, risking everything for the cause of liberty. Chapter 34. Securing the Advantage. The Continental Army was gaining ground, bolstered not only by strategic victories on the battlefield, but by the relentless efforts of Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward in the shadows. The British, disoriented by the repeated dismantling of their networks, struggled to mount effective countermeasures. Edward spread the latest intelligence across the table. Every loyalist cell we've neutralized, every communication we've intercepted, and every supply line disrupted has given the Continental leadership a clear advantage. But the British are still dangerous, still capable of striking where we least expect it. Clara looked determined. Then we ensure they have no opportunity. Every safe house, courier route, and insider network must be accounted for. This is our chance to solidify control before they can recover. Mercer agreed. Agreed. We move to secure the colony's intelligence network entirely. We intercept residual loyalist communications, ensure local leaders are briefed on threats, and establish protocols that the British cannot disrupt. Meg added, we also strengthen local Patriot cells. The more distributed and organized they are, the harder it is for the British to strike effectively. Knowledge is as much a weapon as muskets or cannons. Over the next several days, the team executed coordinated operations across multiple colonies, neutralizing residual loyalist networks that remained hidden in key towns, intercepting and decoding communications, ensuring no British orders reached their targets, training local intelligence agents, creating a resilient network capable of independent operation, feeding misinformation into British channels to maintain confusion and delay any counteroffensive. Each success strengthened the Patriots' position, reducing the threat of surprise attacks and ensuring the Continental leadership could plan offensives with confidence. By nightfall, Mercer assessed their progress. We've secured intelligence, disrupted enemy operations, and ensured the Continental leadership has the strategic upper hand. The British will no longer control the narrative or the battlefield. Clara exhaled, relief mixed with resolve. We've stopped them. The revolution is safe, for now. Edward nodded. True, but now we dictate the pace. We can strike when and where it benefits the revolution most. The British are reacting, not acting. And that advantage will be decisive. Every misstep we force them to make gives the Patriots momentum. Meg added, and that advantage will be decisive. Every misstep we force them to make gives the Patriots momentum they cannot recover from. Mercer looked toward the horizon, shadows of the night fading into dawn. Tonight, we've ensured that the revolution is no longer just a fight for survival. It is a fight we can win, not just on the battlefield, but in every unseen corner where strategy, courage, and intelligence define victory.
Chapter 35. The Final Strike. The British were reeling. Repeated disruptions, intercepted communications, and dismantled loyalist networks had left their operations in disarray. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley knew that to truly secure the revolution, they had to strike at the very core of the British command in the colonies. Edward spread a map on the table, pointing to a fortified British headquarters deep in New Jersey. This is where all major operations are coordinated. Troop movements, loyalist uprisings, supply logistics. If we take it out, the British will lose centralized control for months, maybe longer. Clara's eyes narrowed. And if we fail? Mercer's jaw tightened. Then the revolution risks everything we've fought for. But if we succeed, we triple the enemy entirely and give the Continental Army the upper hand for the final phase of the war. Meg added, "We've planned for every contingency, every patrol, every loyalist agent. This is our most dangerous mission yet, but we've survived worse. We can do this." Under the cover of night, the team moved with precision. Shadows were their allies, and silence their weapon. They navigated forests, rivers, and hidden paths, bypassing sentries and patrols. Every step carried the risk of exposure, yet their years of experience made them ghost-like in execution. Mercer and Clara infiltrated the headquarters from a rear entrance, silently neutralizing guards and securing critical intelligence. Meg coordinated diversions outside, creating controlled fires and small explosions to draw attention away from the infiltration. Edward manipulated British communications, feeding false orders that delayed reinforcements and spread confusion within the camp. Inside, Mercer discovered detailed plans for coordinated attacks across multiple colonies. Quickly, he secured the documents and destroyed the operational headquarters communication equipment, severing the British command structure in one decisive strike. A high-ranking officer attempted to intercept them, but Mercer, Clara, and Meg executed a precise and calculated defense, ensuring the mission's success while leaving minimal traces of their presence. By dawn, the British command structure in New Jersey lay in chaos. Troop movements were delayed, supply lines disrupted, and loyalist networks in disarray. The Continental Army, armed with the intelligence Mercer had secured, gained a strategic advantage that would last for months. Clara exhaled, exhaustion mixed with relief. "We've done it. The enemy is crippled, and the revolution has the upper hand." Mercer looked toward the horizon, determination shining in his eyes. "This is more than a victory. It's proof that strategy, courage, and intelligence can shape history. The shadows we move through have become the true battleground of freedom." Edward nodded. "The British may regroup, but they can no longer operate with the same efficiency or control. The tide has irrevocably shifted." Meg smiled faintly, exhaustion giving way to satisfaction. "We've secured the revolution, at least in this phase, and history will remember the impact of those who acted in silence, unseen but decisive." As the sun rose over New Jersey, Mercer and his companions disappeared into the hidden paths once more. Their mission had delivered a decisive blow to the British, and the revolution's future had been secured through courage, cunning, and the relentless pursuit of liberty. Chapter 37. Shadows of the Past. The streets of Philadelphia were quiet, but for Johnathan Mercer, the city carried echoes of every mission, every risk, and every life touched by the Shadow War. The victories were clear. The British networks had been dismantled,
loyalist uprisings prevented, and the Continental Army operating with unprecedented intelligence. But the cost weighed heavily on him. Clara, sensing his unrest, joined him on a rooftop overlooking the city. "You're carrying more than strategy tonight," she said softly. "The faces, the sacrifices, the people we couldn't save, they follow you." Mercer nodded, his jaw tight. "Every mission, someone paid a price. Even when we succeeded, lives were changed forever. I can't forget that. It's the burden we bear in the shadows." Meg approached, carrying a stack of letters from civilians and soldiers alike. "Look at this," she said, handing them to Mercer. "People are starting to realize what we've done. Freedom is growing, and lives have been saved. That counts for something." Edward, ever the pragmatist, added, "The personal cost is unavoidable, but the work ensured the revolution survives. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every risk taken, they were not in vain." Mercer exhaled, a mixture of relief and lingering sorrow in his expression. "I know, but it's hard not to carry the weight of every choice we've made. Every life altered by this war is a shadow I can't escape." Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "And yet, it's those very shadows that allowed liberty to flourish. The revolution needed people willing to act in secrecy, to take risks that others couldn't. We have shaped history in ways the world may never know." Over the next days, Mercer's team focused on consolidating their operations and preparing for the final phases of the war. They provided intelligence to Washington and his generals, ensuring that upcoming campaigns were informed by accurate and strategic data, strengthened networks of loyal patriots, training them in both intelligence gathering and covert operations, ensured the safety of key leaders, anticipating potential threats and neutralizing any remaining loyalist plots, reflected on personal costs, each member acknowledging sacrifices made, friends lost, and the burden of responsibility they carried. One evening, as Mercer sat by the river with Clara, Meg, and Edward, he spoke quietly. "We've done what few could. We've changed the course of this war, but the shadows, they never leave you. The choices, the secrets, the lives we've touched, they remain with us." Meg smiled faintly. "And yet, those same shadows gave the revolution a chance to survive. History will remember the outcome, even if it never knows the stories behind it." Edward nodded. "The war is far from over, but the Patriots are stronger, smarter, and better prepared than ever. The legacy of the Shadow War is secure." Clara looked over the city. "And when peace comes, the shadows we walked in will be remembered quietly in the lives we saved and the freedom we fought for." Mercer exhaled, the weight slightly eased by their words. The battles in the shadows had tested them, shaped them, and forever changed the course of history. But the promise of liberty and the vision of a free nation gave purpose to every sacrifice. As night fell over Philadelphia, the four companions prepared for the final phase of the revolution. They had survived the shadows, shaped history unseen, and stood ready to guide the birth of a new nation.
Chapter 38. Triumph in the Shadows. The Continental Army was poised for a decisive moment. The British, weakened by repeated intelligence failures, fractured loyalist networks, and disrupted supply lines, were on the defensive. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley had spent months shaping this outcome from the shadows, and now the culmination of their work was about to be realized. Edward unfurled the final intelligence maps. The British are preparing to retreat from key positions.
Loyalist support is collapsing, and Continental forces have a clear path to victory. But we must ensure their command structure cannot recover to strike again. Clara's eyes were sharp. Then we move quickly. Every remaining Loyalist stronghold must be neutralized, every British plan intercepted, and every leader protected. This is the final push. Mercer's jaw tightened. We've done everything up to now in secrecy. Tonight, we ensure the revolution cannot be reversed. This is our moment, not on the battlefield alone, but in the shadows that shape it. Meg added, we've trained local intelligence cells, misdirected British operations, and protected key leaders. Now we coordinate everything for a final, decisive effect. That night, the team executed coordinated operations across the colonies, intercepting last-minute orders from the British High Command, preventing reinforcements and sabotage attempts, disrupting supply caches and Loyalist positions, leaving British forces unable to regroup, guiding Continental Army movements using intelligence that ensured surprise and strategic advantage, neutralizing remaining Loyalist agents, preventing threats to key revolutionary figures. In New York, Mercer led a daring infiltration into a British communication hub, ensuring that every message leaving the city was compromised or delayed. Clara and Meg created diversions in surrounding areas, drawing troops away, while Edward manipulated intercepted intelligence to reinforce confusion and disarray among British ranks. As dawn broke, the impact of their operations became clear. British forces were retreating, Loyalist uprisings had failed, and the Continental Army had secured key positions across multiple colonies. Washington himself commended the intelligence contributions that had turned the tide in favor of the Patriots. Clara exhaled, relief and triumph evident in her voice. It's over, for now. The revolution is winning. Mercer looked out over the rising sun, his mind reflecting on the months of shadow operations. Not just winning, it's being secured. Every risk, every mission, every sacrifice in the shadows ensured that liberty could flourish. The revolution was won not only with muskets, but with strategy, courage, and unseen acts of valor. Edward nodded. The British may regroup elsewhere, but here the tide has shifted irreversibly. The Patriots control both the battlefield and the intelligence that guides it. Meg smiled faintly. And the people will never know the stories behind these victories, but they will inherit the freedom we fought for in silence. As the colonies awoke to the dawn of a new era, Mercer and his companions disappeared once more into the alleys, forests, and hidden pathways. Their work in the shadows had culminated in a triumph for liberty, securing the foundation of a nation yet to be born. For Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward, the revolution had been won in the shadows, but the promise of a free America would shine for generations, a legacy born from courage, cunning, and unwavering dedication. Chapter 39. Reflections and Reckoning. The war in the shadows had ended, but its echoes lingered. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley gathered in their final safe house in Philadelphia, taking stock of months of perilous operations, victories, and sacrifices. Edward spread reports and letters across the table, detailing the current state of British forces, Loyalist activity, and Continental Army movements. The British have retreated, Loyalist networks are fractured, and the Continental Army is preparing for consolidation across the colonies. But remnants of their operations still exist. We cannot afford complacency. Clara leaned against the wall, her eyes distant. We've done more than anyone could have imagined. We stopped assassinations, neutralized uprisings, and dismantled intelligence networks. Yet, I can't forget those who paid the ultimate price along the way." Mercer nodded, a shadow of sorrow in his expression. "The victories are undeniable, but every operation carried consequences, lives altered, missions that went wrong, choices that haunt. The war is won, but we are not untouched by it." Meg added softly, "And yet we have ensured something far greater, the survival of the revolution and the promise of freedom. That is a legacy that outshines our shadows and sacrifices." The team spent the day reflecting, consolidating intelligence, and planning for the transition from shadow operations to open strategy. They coordinated with Continental leaders to ensure remaining loyalist cells were neutralized or brought under surveillance. Continental Army communications and intelligence were fully secured. Local Patriot leaders were empowered to maintain order and support independence efforts. A framework for ongoing intelligence operations was established to safeguard the fledgling nation. As the evening sun painted Philadelphia in warm hues, Johnathan stood at a window, looking out over a city poised on the brink of a new era. "We've fought in the shadows, unseen, unheard, but our actions have shaped the birth of a nation. The cost was high, but the reward, the future of liberty, is priceless." Clara joined him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "And soon the revolution will be remembered not only for its battles, but for the courage and ingenuity that won it when no one was watching." Edward added, "We've done what few could. The British have been forced into retreat, the Patriots are empowered, and the colonies have a real chance at independence. Our work laid the foundation for the United States." Meg smiled faintly, glancing at the maps and intelligence files. "The shadows will fade, but the freedom we have fought for will shine. That's the story history will tell, even if it never knows the names behind it." As night fell over Philadelphia, Mercer and his companions felt the weight of both loss and triumph. The revolution was far from over in every sense, but the Shadow War had ensured that the tide had irrevocably shifted. Liberty had been preserved, the colonies empowered, and the United States was on the horizon, a nation born from courage, strategy, and sacrifice. For Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward, the shadows of their past were the foundation of a brighter future. They had shaped history unseen, and now the promise of freedom would shine for generations to come.
Chapter 40. Dawn of a Nation. The first light of dawn stretched across the colonies, casting golden rays over cities, towns, and countryside alike. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley stood atop a quiet hill overlooking Philadelphia, reflecting on a journey that had taken them through shadows, danger, and unimaginable trials. The revolution was no longer a distant struggle. It was a living, breathing reality. The British had been forced into retreat, loyalist influence had waned, and the Continental Army held a decisive advantage. The independence of the colonies was within reach, and Mercer's Shadow War had ensured that victory was not just possible, but inevitable. Clara broke the silence, her voice tinged with awe. "We've done it. Every mission, every risk, every sacrifice, it led to this moment. The colonies are on the verge of freedom." Mercer nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. It wasn't just the battles on the field. Every intelligence coup, every infiltration, every act in secrecy shaped the outcome. The revolution was won in ways the world may never know, but the result will be remembered forever.
Meg smiled faintly, thinking of the countless nights spent in shadows and danger. The people may never know our names, but they'll inherit the freedom we fought for. That's enough. Edward, ever the pragmatist, added, and the British know now that the Patriots are not just soldiers, they are strategists, spies, and guardians of liberty. The tide has shifted irreversibly. The revolution belongs to the colonies, and the foundation we have built will last. As the sun rose higher, Mercer reflected on the journey, on the friends lost, the dangers faced, the shadows navigated, and the victories earned. Each mission, each choice had carried immense weight, but together they had altered the course of history. Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. The shadows we walked in were dark, but they led us here. Liberty is rising, and the future is ours to shape. Mercer turned to his companions, gratitude and resolve shining in his eyes. We did this together. Every moment, every danger, every risk, our actions ensured that freedom will endure. The United States will rise, and its story will be told for generations. We were the unseen force that made it possible. Meg looked toward the distant city, now alive with hope and potential. And when history is written, the sacrifices of those in the shadows will live on in the lives they saved and the freedom they secured. Edward nodded, surveying the horizon. The war in the shadows is over, but its legacy endures. Liberty is no longer just an ideal, it is a reality, forged by courage, strategy, and unwavering dedication. The four of them stood together, the morning wind carrying the promise of a new nation. The revolution had been won, not only through battles and armies, but through the unseen efforts of those who dared to act where no one else could. As the sun fully rose, the colonies awoke to a new era. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley vanished once more into the city, knowing their work in the shadows had shaped history forever. The United States of America was being born, a nation forged by courage, strategy, sacrifice, and the silent triumphs of those who walked unseen, ensuring that liberty would endure for generations. Chapter 41. Shadows at Peace. The Declaration of Independence had been signed, and word of the colony's formal break from Britain spread like wildfire. Philadelphia buzzed with energy, relief, and cautious optimism. Yet for Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley, the work in the shadows was far from fully complete. Edward spread the latest intelligence reports. The British have retreated from most colonial positions. Loyalist resistance is sporadic and disorganized. Our networks have ensured the Continental Army can operate freely and maintain control. Clara leaned against the wall, her expression softening. The war may continue on battlefields, but in terms of intelligence and organization, the Patriots have never been stronger. The revolution has a real chance now. Mercer exhaled, a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction in his eyes. We've fought battles no one will ever read about. Every mission, every risk we took ensured that liberty survived. Now we can finally take a step back and see the results. Meg smiled faintly. The colonies are alive with hope. Citizens are rebuilding, leaders are organizing, and the future is being written. We've done our part. The shadows we walked in have finally allowed light to return. Over the next weeks, the team focused on consolidating the networks they had created, ensuring that the Patriots could defend themselves against any lingering threats while empowering local leaders to maintain order. They trained operatives, secured intelligence channels, and prepared for the difficult task of maintaining freedom in a fragile new nation. One evening, Mercer stood at the city's riverbank, watching boats drift in the twilight. Clara joined him, speaking softly. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" Mercer nodded. "I do. We've shaped history in ways no one will ever know, but the revolution is only the beginning. The United States must grow, thrive, and protect the freedoms we fought for. Our shadows are behind us, but the work we did will ripple through generations." Edward joined them, holding a map marking the colonies now under Patriot control. The British are defeated in this theater. Loyalists are either gone or reconciled. The Patriots have the upper hand. Now the task is to guide the nation wisely, using the systems we built to ensure liberty endures. Meg looked at her companions with quiet pride. "We've carried the revolution in the shadows. Now it belongs to everyone. The freedom we preserved will live on, and our sacrifices will become the invisible foundation of a nation." As night fell over Philadelphia, Mercer and his team finally allowed themselves a moment of quiet. The shadows that had defined their lives were fading, replaced by the dawn of a new era. Liberty had been secured, the revolution had triumphed, and the United States of America was taking its first breaths. For Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward, the war in the shadows had ended, but the legacy of their courage, intelligence, and unwavering dedication would endure forever. The nation they had fought to protect now had the chance to flourish, built on the silent triumphs of those who dared to act unseen.
Chapter 42. Legacy of the Shadows. Years had passed since the colonies declared independence. Philadelphia had grown. Towns and cities were rebuilding, and the Continental Army had transformed into a fledgling national force. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley now moved through a world shaped in part by their unseen efforts. Mercer stood in a quiet room, reviewing reports and maps detailing the ongoing efforts to stabilize the new nation. "The revolution may have ended on the battlefield, but the war for freedom never truly ends. We've laid the foundation for a system of intelligence and security that will protect the United States for generations." Clara nodded, her eyes reflecting pride and cautious optimism. "Every spy we trained, every network we secured, every piece of intelligence we intercepted, it all contributed to the survival of the colonies. Now it will guide the nation towards stability and security." Meg added, "The people lived their lives unaware of what we did in the shadows. But that's the point. The freedom we preserved is theirs to enjoy. History will remember the revolution, even if it never remembers our names." Edward, ever meticulous, surveyed the maps. "We've created protocols, trained operatives, and established communication networks that will outlast any single conflict. Future leaders will benefit from the systems we put in place. The nation owes a debt to the unseen guardians of liberty." As the four companions reflected, they realized that their personal sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the dangers faced, and the lives altered had built more than just military victories. They had forged the foundation of a free, enduring nation. Mercer finally spoke, voice calm but resolute. "We fought battles no one will ever know about, and yet they shaped history. Freedom was won in shadows as much as in fields of battle. That is our legacy." Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "And the legacy lives on in every citizen who can now walk freely, speak openly, and pursue life without fear of oppression. That is the true measure of our work." Meg smiled faintly. "The shadows fade, but the results remain. The nation thrives because we acted when it mattered most." Edward added,
and we ensured that intelligence, vigilance, and courage remain part of the foundation of the United States. Future generations may never know the sacrifices made in secret, but they will inherit the freedom that resulted. As the sun set over Philadelphia, Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward stood together knowing that the revolution had succeeded not only through armies and battles, but through intelligence, strategy, and the courage of those willing to act in silence. The shadows of their past had shaped a nation's future, and their legacy would endure as the unseen architects of freedom, guardians of liberty whose actions ensured that the United States could rise and thrive for generations to come.
Chapter 43. Freedom's Horizon. Years had passed since the Revolution's decisive moments, and the United States was no longer a fragile collection of colonies, but a burgeoning nation. Cities thrived, trade routes opened, and the ideals of liberty began to take root in everyday life. Yet for Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley, the work of shaping the future was personal as well as historical. Mercer walked along the Delaware River, watching children play along the banks, merchants unload goods, and citizens move freely under the morning sun. "It's remarkable," he said softly, "to see the freedom we fought for manifest in such ordinary, beautiful ways. Every mission we undertook in secrecy allowed this moment to exist." Clara joined him, eyes bright with hope. "And the people know only the results, not the risks we took or the dangers we faced. But that's the way it should be. Freedom thrives when it is lived, not just protected." Meg smiled, adjusting her cloak against the crisp air. "The revolution shaped the nation, but we shaped the revolution. The unseen efforts, the shadow operations, the sacrifices, they created the foundation on which these lives are now built." Edward, ever practical, added, "And the systems we put in place, networks of intelligence, communication protocols, and trained operatives ensure that freedom is not just won, but preserved. The nation now has safeguards that will last for generations." For the first time in years, the four companions allowed themselves a quiet reflection, free from the constant tension of hidden threats and secret missions. The battles, the espionage, and the sacrifices had culminated in a tangible reality, a nation capable of self-determination, guided by liberty and justice. Mercer spoke finally, voice calm but resolute. "The shadows we walked in are behind us, but their impact endures. The United States will grow, thrive, and prosper because we acted when it mattered most. That is our legacy." Clara placed her hand on his shoulder. "And we've seen the first fruits of that legacy. Freedom is no longer an idea. It's a living, breathing reality. That is the greatest reward of all." Meg looked to the horizon. "The shadows may fade, but the light they preserved will shine for generations. The story of liberty is now in the hands of the people, and our part in it, though unseen, will echo forever." Edward nodded, surveying the river and the city beyond. "We've done what few could. The revolution succeeded, the nation is secure, and the future is bright. Our work in the shadows has ensured that freedom endures." As the sun rose higher, illuminating the colonies with golden light, Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward turned away from the bank road and walked together into the city. The Shadow War was over. The revolution had triumphed, and the United States of America, built on courage, intelligence, and sacrifice, was ready to embrace the promise of liberty. The shadows that had shaped history had now given way to a horizon of freedom, and the legacy of those who acted unseen would endure forever in the nation they had helped to create.
Chapter 44, Enduring Shadows. Decades had passed since the Revolution, and the United States of America was thriving. Philadelphia, Boston, and New York had grown into bustling cities, and citizens traveled freely, traded openly, and embraced the ideals of liberty the Patriots had fought for. Yet for Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley, the memory of the Shadow War remained vivid, a testament to the unseen sacrifices that had made the nation possible. Mercer walked through the streets of Philadelphia, watching children play, merchants sell their goods, and townspeople speak freely without fear. "The country we fought for," he said softly, "is real. Every mission, every risk, every sacrifice we endured in the shadows helped bring this moment to life." Clara, walking beside him, added, "The people enjoy freedom without knowing the battles fought in secret. That is how liberty survives, quietly, resiliently, and sometimes invisibly." Meg reflected on their journey. "We shaped history in ways no one will ever read in books, but our actions ensured that liberty was preserved. That's a legacy that will never fade." Edward, ever analytical, nodded. "The networks we built, the intelligence we gathered, and the strategies we employed created a blueprint for the nation's future. Freedom endures because of the structures we left behind." Mercer paused, looking toward the horizon where the first light of dawn kissed the city. "We walked in shadows to bring light to the world. The revolution was won not only on battlefields, but in the unseen moments where courage, strategy, and resolve mattered most." Clara smiled faintly. "And that light is now in the hands of the people. Liberty has taken root, and the United States will grow stronger with every passing year." Meg added, "The shadows we lived in may fade, but the freedom they preserved will shine forever. The nation stands because we dared to act where others could not." Edward concluded, "We've seen the revolution succeed, the nation secure, and freedom flourish. Our work may remain unseen in history, but its impact is eternal." As the four companions walked together through the city, they realized that the Shadow War was over, but its legacy had endured. The United States of America, built on courage, intelligence, sacrifice, and unseen acts of heroism, had been born. The nation would grow, thrive, and prosper, forever shaped by those who dared to act in silence to secure liberty. The shadows that had once defined their lives had given way to the light of freedom, and the legacy of Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward would endure in the story of a nation built on courage, wisdom, and unwavering dedication to liberty.
Chapter 45. The Dawn of Legacy. The morning sun rose over Philadelphia, illuminating streets filled with bustling citizens, markets alive with commerce, and townspeople walking freely under the promise of liberty. The revolution was over, yet its lessons and sacrifices echoed through every corner of the new nation. Johnathan Mercer, Clara Whitlock, Meg Hawthorne, and Edward Langley walked quietly through the city, their steps carrying the weight of history they had helped shape. The Shadow War had ended, but its effects remained etched in the foundations of the United States. Mercer paused at a city square, watching children play and citizens converse openly. "We fought battles no one will ever read about," he said, voice low but proud. "But every unseen action, every risk, every secret mission ensured that the colonies could survive and thrive." Clara joined him, her gaze following a group of young patriots practicing drills in the square. "Freedom is alive, and it's theirs now. They may never know the sacrifices behind it, but they lived the legacy." Meg looked at the streets, where merchants traded, families laughed,
and the rhythm of a free society unfolded. We built the shadows that allowed liberty to rise. Now the light can flourish, unthreatened. Edward adjusted his cloak, scanning the horizon. The systems we created, the networks we built, the intelligence we preserved, they will continue to safeguard this nation. Freedom will endure because the groundwork was laid in secrecy by those willing to act where others could not. Mercer smiled faintly, turning to his companions. Our work is done, and the revolution is secured. But the legacy, the freedom we fought for, the nation we preserved, will live on far beyond us. That is the true reward of the shadows we walked in. Clara placed her hand on his shoulder, and in that we find peace. The people live, the nation thrives, and liberty is eternal. Meg added, the shadows fade, but the results endure. Every generation that walks these streets owes a debt to those who acted unseen, with courage and conviction. Edward nodded, the rising sun casting long golden rays across the city. The United States is born from courage, strategy, and sacrifice. Our names may remain unknown, but the nation will stand as a monument to the work we did in silence. As the four companions walked toward the heart of the city, the streets came alive with promise and purpose. The revolution had ended, but the dawn of the United States had begun. Free, resilient, and enduring. The shadows that had defined their lives had given way to the light of liberty, and the legacy of Mercer, Clara, Meg, and Edward would forever remain embedded in the foundation of a nation built on courage, intelligence, and unwavering dedication to freedom.